All those who are here, Phil,
Yes.
Steve,
Yes.
Wendy,
Yes.
Eric,
Yes.
Charlie,
Yes.
and I'm here, Dean, so we are now in
And Gavin.
order. Gavin,
Yeah,
I
Gavin
said,
too.
I said, did I skip you? I don't know.
No,
what
you
did.
said Eric.
I said Eric.
I said yes anyway.
You guessed the vote tonight.
I'm sorry,
No, no worries.
I'm sorry. Okay, we are in order. First, is minutes as available. I did send out 2 minutes, but only 2 minutes ago. So you don't really have a chance to have reviewed them. We are going to shuffle those off to, the next meeting, I guess.
And I
there's-
just, Dean, the only thing I'll say is I sent these off to you yesterday because I
Right.
couldn't edit them.
Right, so I
think
just got a
these are good.
PDF and then, but then Gavin came back and said, here's a Word version. So that
Right,
was,
right.
that,
Okay.
that was
Yes, sir.
very late. This whole thing was very late, this particular interval. We had too much time and so we did everything even later. That was really the.
I made those edits, by the way, so we're good on that.
Like Mr. Jammers?
No, I can
Did you
change
get that one?
No, I'll check.
I will,
To me on the
I
way.
will, we will have more appropriate clerk reviewed versions that we'll send out between now and the next meeting. Let's not spend all
No,
tremendous
no.
amount of
Coming
time
here,
on
it
that.
suddenly occurred to me why we picked Wednesday. Seems to be a distraction tomorrow night.
Yeah.
Well, there's a finance committee meeting, a hearing tomorrow.
Oh, and the president's state of the.
No,
Union message.
he's gonna
Oh,
be,
yeah, that's.
I don't know who takes precedence then. Finance committee or
solar.
president. you know. Well, he probably doesn't go on till like 9 or something, so maybe we have a chance to get the finance
Yeah.
committee done. Okay, so chair's report. It's actually been a relatively busy interval for me. I was interviewed for a bridge article about solar. And in that article, interview, I more or less, indicated that where we are right now is that we have a high likelihood of the roof at the high school. We have a lock on a battery, and we have some control and management money that we're making, part of our article. I put in the bucket of not happening, the basin, and I put in the bucket of might happen, the landfill, because it's still up in the air. When I was interviewed, we didn't even have a vendor yet to do the feasibility for that. So we were kind of far out on that. In addition to that, I was interviewed by a guy named Ken Reeves, who is a member of Mothers Out Front. They just wanted to see what we were doing, what the article was. And I gave him a pretty long, phone call just to give him an update. And it was pretty much a similar update to that, which is, we're pretty solid on these things and we are less solid on the landfill and we're not doing the basin. I then followed up with him and forwarded him the school briefing paper that we put together so he would have good detail. And he's got all of that. In addition to those two interviews, I've had a couple of back and forth conversations with the chair of the finance committee. We were originally scheduled for the 26th with the select board. By the time the warrant was printed and sent out, it had been moved to the 7th, which is tomorrow, with the finance committee. But at his discretion, the chair wanted to move us to the 19th. So we're going to be on the 19th. Which is Tuesday, maybe. I've forgotten what it is. I believe that's the date that he's given me. In addition to that, the finance committee meets in a regular session on the 14th. And they want me to come in and talk to them in their regular session before we end up at the hearing. Why I gotta do it twice, I'm not sure, but
Fair.
that's.
And they'll vote after the first one, of course.
Yeah, exactly. They won't have exhausted all their questions on the 14th and I don't know what they'll be asking me on the 19th. I'm not sure. I don't know how much can change between those two in that interval. So, so that's with the finance committee. Was there any other stuff that I worked on in that? We had a meeting with the folks from Eaton who provide the control and command software and hardware solution that some of us had, kind of looked at. That included Jason and Laura and a guy named Joe, whose last name I don't remember, at the light plant, and they asked some good questions. And the Eaton folks, tried to show how their system might be a benefit to the light plant. So that was a little bit of a, it was a little bit of a boost for that angle on what we're trying to do to sort of make the system a little more robust for the light plant before we start adding more distributed resources. So we had that meeting.
Were they receptive as you best gathered?
To be frank, I think that the Eaton presentation was a canned presentation and was not well tailored to the problem set, to the use cases that our specific case really would demand. So that was sort of a negative. It was just like, hey, it does all these things. It would be nice if we got through all the dross of all the things it could do and focused it on the things we needed to do. And so I think from that perspective, in my view, it fell short. That the presentation fell short. I think the software and hardware solution may well be able to do what we want it to do, but the solution as presented was a little bit confusing and not. The presentation could have been better. Let's put it that way. Okay. So let's see what that was.
So what did Laura and Joe, did they appreciate what the tool provides, and did they?
One of Laura's main questions was, let's put batteries off to the side.
Yeah.
What can your solution do to help us with if all we have is solar,
Yeah.
which is what they have today?
Yeah.
They have just solar that's saturating the system. What can your system do to help us with that? And the main answer to that is it can automatically see, well, this is where you are in terms of your load balancing. What are my tools at my disposal? I can automatically curtail.
Yeah.
I can automatically curtail.
Yeah.
So that's something it can do.
Yeah.
But beyond that,
Just-
getting into use
yeah.
of battery to draw it
Yeah,
off and
yeah.
use it productively
Right.
would be more helpful. But she did ask that question. And Jason gave him more of an update. He joined, so Jason's in the meeting. Can we have the larger monitor? Because it's really hard to see
I was
who's
gonna
on the
say, I'm
meeting.
just
I have it
trying to
right
open
here.
this, turn this
It's
on.
not really a problem, but,
Yeah.
it would be.
I read an article in the Times, which had an interesting point. Apparently,
There's a remote, Eric, there's a remote over on that table there. You just power it on.
Plugged in.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's the difference. I
Yeah.
had to plug everything else in, so you never know.
I'd like to think it's connected.
apparently, there is significant thought
There you go.
that large battery sets should not be near schools because of concerns about fire risk.
Well, that was a concern that I think the school committee voiced at least some concern about that during our discussions about whether we could put one on this high school campus. I don't know how much pushback occurred during the building process, where right now the idea is it's being cited, there's gonna be one sited right on the middle school campus, and it's really right next to the building, really there.
But I think they put a lot of fire protection there too, right?
Do they? I don't know.
Or something, I think
It's like on the gymnasium end, it's,
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
far away from the
Yeah,
classroom stuff,
yeah,
and, it's.
It sounds to me like we might be well advised to know in advance whether that's gonna generate a lot of opposition. If, for instance, the fire department blessed it, that would probably answer the question. And if they opposed it, that would also answer the question.
I am aware that at least one neighbor during some of those conversations, kind of spoke up and asked, because they were on a butter. Is this a fire risk? This is a huge
Yeah.
thing, and
Yeah.
my house is like right there. What should I worry? And they were sort of told not to worry. I think that was kind of the messaging. Don't worry. I don't know if there was any technical answer, which is more like just don't
Would
worry.
it be difficult for us to find out position of the fire department? If they're gonna oppose it, we're gonna change it anyway.
I don't, that's sort of.
Charlie might know.
Yeah, Charlie might know. Charlie, you wanna come
I
in?
would interject that I'm not sure that this is part of any opposition that would be voiced toward our article. Because we
Right.
are putting forward an article for the CMS battery. So we don't really have an issue we have no standing on that one. I mean, you know, if somebody, and I don't know what would be presented to town meeting anyway with respect to you know, to the battery, if that's what you're talking about in terms of opposition.
Well, we
Right.
need to state where we think we're gonna put. the
Yeah, it would be
batteries.
good for us to be
So,
able to give
say
a,
it's
you
not
know, an
a
update.
school.
But we're not citing any batteries. We're not involved at anything at that level.
Well, but we're advocating.
We're
for
advocating for
batteries,
the purchase
So
of
we
battery.
better be ready to say where we think we're gonna put it.
Right.
But I mean, based on our discussions last time with Laura, it seems like maybe there are different areas where we could put it, whether it's close to the array, whether it's close to the substation.
Right, right.
So maybe we don't have to answer it and we could just say,
Or it could even be close to one of the arrays that are, the other array
Yeah,
over at
that's true.
WR
Grace,
Grace near the bus depot.
yeah.
There's
So
different
Yeah.
places.
We
that-
might not have to
Yeah.
specify exactly, we can say based on CMLP's best
Recommendation.
suggestion.
Yeah.
But you know, we would follow all safety and fire protocols from the fire department and from the state. I think that's about all we can say.
Yeah, and I think that's a very reasonable position.
Yeah.
That, you know, we're not gonna.
But from our point of view, we don't need to generate unnecessary opposition.
No.
That-
No.
that's the
But
case.
we won't be.
I don't
Yeah.
anticipate that that the way this gets presented will generate any, honestly. If we have, you know, we're not gonna push to put it in a specific place so hard that we're up against
Somebody.
somebody
Right.
else. Because there's plenty of options for us to do it in places that are not at all controversial and not near enough to people that it really causes any kind of this huge.
And are we being clear that it really will not be on the high school? Can you say that much?
No, there are probably locations on the high school
Yeah,
campus that
yeah.
it could go that are far enough away from the building.
Yeah.
At AB, they put a battery on their campus, but
Yeah.
it's not like right next to the building. It's like across a driveway on the
Yeah.
other side, and they had to carve into the side of a hill and create some kind of buffer between the battery,
Yeah.
you know. It's a very nicely carved in little niche that they put it in, but it's on the campus.
Yeah,
I mean, I think
I'm
it's
just wondering
doable.
if we could, to Phil's point about any kind of opposition, if we are confident enough it wouldn't be at the high school, can we say that?
No, well,
No, we don't need to say that.
we don't need to say that.
I'm
We've
just-
been in
yeah,
conversation
yeah.
with the school committee about the possibility of it, and they've left that open. And I'm sure we can come to, if we came to an agreement about this is within
Yeah.
safety guidelines. That's a 93 acre campus. There's probably.
To answer Phil's questions more directly, the concern was made to the building committee, and SMMA did respond to it, and they considered it not to be an issue with respect to the design. They basically said, we're okay here. So
Yeah.
one down.
Good. All right, so that, and as Charlie pointed out, the CMS is really off to the side. It's not really part of our article or our initiative. It's sort of a project that's already been approved and spec'd, fully spec'd. So, anyway,
Just to ask about the finance committee meeting, there's one on the 14th and the 19th that you'll be attending.
14th is a regular meeting on a Thursday, and the 19th, I think, is a Tuesday meeting.
Hearing, it's a
A
hearing.
Tuesday meeting, which is something like
And are you
that.
also doing tomorrow or is
What's that?
tomorrow? So not
No,
tomorrow.
I think
I'm not
tomorrow.
doing tomorrow.
Got
it.
Not to, that was pushed off, even though it's been printed in the warrant.
Yeah,
that
well,
I'm-
hopefully people
Some people don't
up,
show up
yeah.
and look for it because
Yeah.
I believe that the finance committee chair moved not just our article, but a couple of other
Oh, really?
articles around, yes. He said
Yeah.
he was reorganizing a few things, so,
Okay.
yeah, so we're up to the 19th. So,
I might have some resources if we need more help with the slope question feasibility. We
Well-
still need that.
Yeah,
that is,
Okay.
when we get to that, that's our next
Right.
topic, and Jason has probably got some updates. He sent me an
Okay.
email, and I'm sure he's happy to chime in.
Oh.
So.
But by the way, Jason probably has some comment on the fire as well, fire situation as well at CMS. So I don't know whether you
I don't,
know more about that or not, Jason, but
Well,
Dean, would you like me to speak
Well,
on
I-
it? I don't have a lot, but it's up to you. You're the chair.
I'm ready to more or less close out my chair's report for now. Just a couple of other points before I leave. Wendy and I have done a lot of very detailed level modeling, but I've sort of paused that because right now we're still pending on the feasibility numbers that we get back from any of these studies. So we're working with rough numbers. We're working with really basic information about how many panels and how big and, what these things are gonna be. And when we have more detail, we would go back and revisit those models. As far as the battery model goes, we've been using that. We've been using what Laura gave us, and for now, I'm standing with that. So whatever I do to get in front of the finance committee is likely gonna rely on whatever we've done so far.
Yeah.
We're not looking to do a tremendous amount more. So, without further ado, we'll move off of the chair's report, and Jason, I'm gonna hand it over to you to give us an update on these feasibilities that you're working on.
Absolutely. Thank you, Dean. So the first one I'll start with is the landfill. We are fortunate enough to have an individual by the name of Michael Hale, who is working about 1 day a week over at the light plant. Michael is the former and now retired general manager of the Shrewsbury light plant. And before that, Selco, before that, he was the deputy town manager of Shrewsbury for over a decade, and has a lot of municipal experience as project management and solar experience. So he's been very valuable, and he's been working on some special projects like these for us and helping us with resources. So it's his knowledge and expertise has been incredibly helpful. He knew and had worked with a firm by the name of TRC. They're out of Lowell. They do construction, project management, OPM work, around the state. And they've done solar. They're aware of and have worked with other firms, construction firms that have done slope development, solar on landfills. So we have had a meeting with them. I wasn't present at the meeting, but Michael and Laura were present at the meeting, and it went very well. They communicated our very tight timeline and the narrow sort of scope that we were looking for, which was this sort of basic feasibility. We relayed to them all of the information that we had from the Kearsarge conversations. We've provided them with some architectural drawings and have requested some CAD versions of those so that they could plug those into their software. They're supposed to be delivering us a scope of work by the end of this week that we could then authorize and get them going very soon, and that they would be able to turn something around in just a couple of weeks to us in terms of discussing the soils, the Mass DEP issues, dealing with the construction and the racking that would be required. They'll also be looking at existing use, existing conduit, and even maybe reaching out to Kearsarge just to understand where they were looking at, if they have to replace their inverters, just to make sure that if they're going to be rerouting conduit in a different place, that it's not going to interfere with the areas that we're looking at. So I think we're going to have something easily by town meeting, but hopefully by the end of the month that will confirm that site's buildability, basically, and let us know if that slope expansion is going to be feasible. So, and I think you might have had somebody there who also had some comments on the slope.
Yeah. Starting to say something
There's no
about
big
healthy
comments.
slope, but
No.
it's not.
So, one thing that you mentioned on that, Jason, was that they would be able to comment on the racking.
Yeah.
And one of the real drivers that's been for a question mark for us is what kind of rule of thumb to use for the development of a cost metric. So that racking is going to be kind of important for that. We took a very basic ground mount number, which is $1.50 per watt to build a ground mount system. It's a lift over what the NREL norm is, but it is apparently an area wide, and SDA gave us their blessing on that number for ground mount. So the question that we can't solve is what's the lift on that to get this specialized racking. So if these folks have any kind of sense of the cost difference between a regular baseline ground mount system and the racking required to do this, that would be very helpful for us to just plug in as we use that as our modeling mechanism to understand the cost structure of something like this.
And the nameplate. Right? It doesn't change.
Well, the nameplate basically has to do with what kind of panels they would. Now, I don't know if this I'm not sure, is this contractor specialize and understand and do a lot of solar? I mean, they clearly were asking all the right questions. Where's the conduit? Where are the inverters? What
Right.
we use? You know, they been working in solar? Is this
Yeah.
a solar contractor?
They have done, yep, solar projects, but what I don't know, like they're not SDA level solar planners and designers. They're
Okay.
more like taking it and making it happen. So, but I don't really know their full capability. But when we get the scope, I can certainly ask for and to see what their capability would be for nameplate verification and what we could get and what their density is and all these other questions. So we'll include as much as we possibly can within the
Yeah.
scope, obviously allowing for some money for the high school feasibility as well. So yeah, as much as we can get. And if you think of other questions and you want to send them to me by the end of the week, and we can make sure we at least mention those. But there will always be a opportunity for time and materials above and beyond that. So if we get the initial feasibility and yet we have a few more
Yep.
questions, we'd like to go back and just get a little bit more information. We can do that too.
So the two basic numbers that are drivers for how we're making these estimates at all is how much total solar capacity would Wendy referred to as nameplate would we be able to cite on the site? Like, right now we've taken what Kearsarge may have handed us by phone and said, well, we can get 1.5 megawatts over there. And that's the number we're using for
Yeah,
that parameter. And the other one is, okay, how much does it cost to build every watt of that? And that one, we're using $1.75.
Yeah,
And we just added 25 cents as a little lift for a more complex racking system and called it $1.75. And those two things coming together really drive the whole cost structure. So if either of those change a lot, that changed a lot. So that's
We're done.
those are the very basics of how we've done any of that, any of this costing.
Question, have we found out the trade-off in terms of both cost and availability of using US manufactured cells, which the use of China is, of course, somewhat sensitive?
Well, it's not only sensitive, Phil, but if we want to get these IRA grants, or basically it's a tax credit that gets paid back out to us, we have to have a certain amount of US content. And that is ramping up per year. It may be already at a pretty high level. But like, for example, the racking system needs to be using US manufactured steel. We're at this level of, if you're gonna get this money, you have to be helping the industrial capacity of the country.
Yeah.
So that's kind of where we are.
I don't happen to know whether on the scale we want and availability and cost, US cells are a practical solution or not. You probably know by now.
I don't.
Can I make a quick comment on this question?
Yeah,
I
sure.
think that US made content and so forth, a lot of these questions would be answered by or would be addressed through the people that put the bidding package together.
Yeah.
You can't send out a bidding package that's not complete with respect to those kinds of details. So I think that, somebody would have another chance to deal with those questions when that process gets started.
Yeah, I think to Phil's point, though, if we take those two big numbers we use, one of which is the cost per watt to build the thing, how much does the US content requirement change that number or affect that number?
Right.
And that's, and we're using that as an estimator going in.
Don't we have the 25 or 30% number? I thought we already had that figured out.
That was above the landfill.
That was,
I mean, standard ground.
the way we figured that out was to take the NREL number, which we started with the SDA number, $1.50. Don't know how much the US content figured into SDA's number, but that's what they gave us, $1.50. And we just added a quarter, $1.75. Dave said, hey, add 10%, but we added a quarter. And so that's where we are. And that may well cover US content, may get the job done, but we don't totally know. It's an unknown. it's a known unknown. We know that it's an unknown.
It's not just cost. The US capacity is rising rapidly, which is another way of saying it's still small.
Yeah, okay, whatever, that's fine. In other words, we may have supply chain
Yes,
issues where we can't get the
Yeah.
stuff, you know, or whatever. Anyway, all that being said, Jason, that's a good status. Can you tell us about the roof? You said leave a little
Yep.
room for the roof at the high school.
Yeah, so we're still aggressively pursuing that feasibility as well. We took the suggested agreement that either you or the task force drafted for the school and CMLP to sign, and Carrie reviewed that, and she wanted town council to review that. Council believed firmly that this should be an official intermunicipal agreement, because it would really spell out legally who was on the hook for what. And so we got that back just today from council. And it's about 5 pages. And after reviewing it, we had no particular problems with it, but town council doesn't deal as much with light plant sort of borrowing and projects as our light plant council, which we're usually using Duncan and Hill for that. And so I did send that to our council just to have one quick review, but that should be turned around by tomorrow, I expect. And so I will be delivering that to Lori, and then hopefully she can get the school committee to sign off on that. But we're not waiting for a signature to keep moving forward. We're obviously trying to get all of our ducks in a row so that as soon as that agreement is executed, we will feel confident expending money to continue on the feasibility. So on that, we have reached out to a couple different places. Number one, and I know this is only tangentially related, but as you know, the middle school solar project is ongoing. We have a lot of requirements for CMLP to complete, to participate in that project. And there's a large degree of uncertainty and capacity for error with as many moving parts and stakeholders as we have between CTA and Hill and SMMA and SDA, so and our internal staff. So we're actually bringing on an internal project manager to make sure that we meet all of our milestones. And she has worked on many solar projects, worked with the state, worked for municipalities, and it's not a huge amount of time, but we found she's already been a huge resource because of all the contacts she knows and the number of people that she has worked with in other projects for solar. So she has steered us to some structural engineers that we have. And so we are reaching out to them to see if they can do some analysis on the as-built drawings, and then look at capacity and loading to make sure that the roof, as designed and built, the structure can hold the panels. We're working, Laura is interfacing with SDA, and she's giving them basically a few charges. Number one is to confirm that the existing structure aligns with the CADMIS report in terms of capacity, that CADMIS shows 1,000 panels on the roof. And we want to make sure that whatever was designed for HVAC and other systems is what's actually there. We know that with the radio station, with wireless, with surveillance, they've added some things up there. And we want to make sure that that's not taking up any sizable portion of the roof. So they'll be doing that and making sure that our estimates that are in that report are feasible. And then they're also going to be getting somebody up on the roof to do some analysis on the state of the roof and look at aging. As you pointed out, Dean, we really don't want to have to replace the roof more than once during the life of the panels. So we want to confirm that this roof is in good shape, and that if we put the panels up in the next year, that we're not going to have to take them down once and then take them down again before the panels have reached their useful life, the end of their useful life. So they're going to be doing that. And then they also may participate in the sort of structural analysis, but they'll also maybe do some basic feasibility on design and look at that. So between and I think there's been another vendor that this individual, Mary, has brought to us too. So Joe, Laura, and I have kind of taken each part, and we're all going off and working as much as we can to get these things turned around, so that once we have this agreement in place, we'll feel ready. and maybe have already some statements of work lined up, and then we can execute those and then start that work. We don't have a timeline on when that would be done, but I feel good that we have so many resources ready that once we get this agreement, we'll be able to move.
Right, and the difference between this situation and the landfill is we have total control over the landfill. We can move forward with that statement of work, you know, as soon as they get it to you,
Exactly.
you can just move along. And here we have, you know, we've got the municipal agreement, and you gotta wait for that, and then the school committee's gotta sign off on it, and then you can pull the trigger and get these things started. So we've got some issues there, and some delays in there that are built in. But I'm glad to hear that you found some vendors who are, you know, in the right areas of expertise. So that's good.
So is this intermunicipality agreement just to conduct the feasibility? Or is
It was, the thing we wrote up was literally just to conduct the
Is it
feasibility.
totally-
You know,
Yeah,
and
okay.
obviously, we're gonna need one that covers the long-term
Yeah.
pieces
Okay.
of once it's running.
Yeah.
Who's maintaining it, who's
Yeah,
taking
yeah,
responsibility,
yeah.
where are the indemnities, there's a lot of,
Yeah. Okay.
5 pages, a little thing that was less than a half a page, that turned into 5 pages.
You got a lawyer
Force majeure, the whole thing, you got it all, you get
Yeah.
all of it, yeah.
You gotta make the
Obvious-
money.
Obviously, once executed, it'll be a public document, so happy to share it after it's out of legal review. But
Okay.
it does look just to have a lot of legal protections for both parties, and not it didn't get more complex. It's still basically just who's responsible for this and who's liable for what, and just making sure that both parties are protected. Obviously, we're seeking out counsel, and so they're making sure that we're protected. That if the person up there on the roof, you know, is looking at something, and then suddenly the school claims ownership is suddenly transferred as a result of this, it just clarifies things like that. So, I think it's definitely a reasonable step to take, just because, you know, this is going to sort of move into hopefully a next phase where we're going to be working much more closely and require probably more lengthy agreement with them on the roof work that's to be done.
That is absolutely the case, because
Yeah.
it's, you know, you're talking about 2 entirely different, you know, administrations, the light plant and then the schools themselves.
Yeah. It's moving along quickly, so that's great.
Yeah, so that's, you know, it's all sounds good. So thank you for that. On the management and controls system, which is our next agenda item, how are we doing for time? We're within minutes of being correct here.
We're actually ahead of time.
We're ahead,
7.
which is frightening.
Ahead of time.
On the management and control system, I gave a little update already on the meeting that was conducted with, I kind of jumped ahead and talked about it, but basically, we had a meeting that was, you know, I just don't think that it really hit the mark. The main mechanism through which we can benefit from the addition of a battery, which is one of the core things that their system can do, is it can automatically control the battery in a way that it's maybe performing arbitrage, buying and
Yeah.
storing energy late at night, and then dispatching it during the day when energy might be more expensive for us to purchase at that time. It could benefit, but the main thing that it could benefit us from is to reduce our demand from the ISO New England during times when the ISO New England itself is stressed. If it's under its, you know, its highest load moments, and we can reduce that, it reduces our assessments, the assessments that we pay for over the course of the month or the whole year for various charges that are assessed. And that's how the battery can really make a buck. And they did not really address that. I tried to ask in various ways, how is this gonna work to help us with that problem? And Charlie has reached out to Rena, who is the primary representative that Rena Patel, who was the primary representative that we worked with to get the meeting pulled together at all, and said, you didn't really address it. And in a very crisp email, he said, these are the problems. We have solar saturation, And we need the battery to be automatically able to help us, protect against solar saturation overloads. And we have a possibility of reducing our demand at the moment when the ISO is at its peak production. And that helps them and it helps reduce our costs. And if you can answer those questions concisely, then maybe we talk. But right now, we're kind of back to square one.
What would happen if, with a little nudging from you, they came back and said, now that we understand your needs much better, we'd like to make a second presentation tailored to your need?
I think that before we had them in front of the light plant and wasted Jason's time again, that we could review it. Either we could review it as a committee, or Charlie and I have kind of taken the lead on that one, and we could review it with them to see that it's really addressing what we see as these two use cases.
Because otherwise, from your report, it sounds like there's a significant probability that a more old-fashioned, less meeting our needs will be selected.
I don't know, quite understand what you mean by
Okay.
old-fashioned, less meeting our needs. I'm
Oh.
not, that those two.
This particular company that you've told us about has a higher degree of automation and therefore more capability. The alternative, which is what the light plant had been considering in the past, is to essentially use and extend what we have.
That's right. And when he was on the light board, when they discussed this, and that was to reconfigure the light plant substation so that energy can flow freely in both directions. And if we are in a position where we're out of balance, we can shunt excess electricity back out onto the New England grid. And there's an opportunity, just like net metering at your house, that we could in effect net meter out to the ISO. They might pay us. They might not pay us. If they don't need it and they don't want it, it would actually cost us to send it out to them. So it's a little bit of a weird,
In either
but
case, financially, we do much better if we store the battery and use it. So,
I don't think there's significant money on the table here.
No.
Arbitrage like that is a very modest value. That's my take on it. So it's at a moment where the New England grid is not in need. Like, everybody's producing solar. We're producing too much solar, so isn't everybody else. So it's probably at a moment when the ISO grid is very understressed, and if we just want to dump it out there, it's a.
They won't pay us much.
They won't pay, the spot market will pay us next to nothing for that. So it's not really a value, but storing it might have some value.
Could we wind this back a little bit, before we get too far ahead of ourselves?
Yeah,
I think, what we did with Rena was to basically go back and say, hey, here's a very specific use case
that's right.
that we'd like to have you evaluate as something that you could serve us with your product line and with your expertise. And they have that. I think that at this point, Jason, you've had a chance to look at the documentation that we put together, and I think that from what I hear from Dean, that you were fairly amenable to it. I think that as terms of process, I think it would be really good to hear from you as to what your take is on this, and on this as a need, for the CMLP going forward with these distributed energy resources. We feel pretty strongly about it, that it's a requirement, but we're not going to do anything without your buy-in and support. So it'd be great to hear what you have to say about this.
Yeah, thank you. So what I'll relay is kind of the conversations that I've had with staff and the operational team, and the sense I've gained from this. And I think it's been super helpful to see the presentation and look into this. I think that we all feel like this is an inevitable place that we need to go. I think that for the operational team, it's more just about the priority and the timing of this. So this device really is a way to integrate a lot of other smart systems. And I think their concerns is that, we don't have a lot of smart systems out there. We have smart meters right now, but meters are really the only thing we'd be able to ingest, because we don't have a lot of real-time data at the substation. We don't have real-time data in switches and relays. And so there would be some basic knowledge of the network, but what we're really concerned about, right, the number one priority is what to do with the solar saturation to make sure that we don't blow up entire buses and have issues with outages because we have been feeding things in the wrong direction when they're not set up to go that way. So, and in order to do that, we obviously need to have visibility into the current usage. Now, the meters help, but we've got about 1,900 meters deployed now, and the real time data that we were promised from Eaton is not really as real time as we thought. And the vast variations of cloud cover coming and then sun and then an accident that takes out a pole and then suddenly the demand goes down by a large amount, that meter data isn't going to be as instantaneous as it needs to be for a system to react that quickly to deal with solar saturation issues to prevent a bad situation. So for the energy arbitrage and for the helping us hit the peak, I think the arbitrage, I agree with Dean, it's not a huge amount of money, and you have to consider that you're putting stress on the battery every time you charge and discharge. And if you're taking away future capacity to hit the peak for the ISO peak, then you're maybe losing a little bit of the power that you could to do that. And we all felt just from the presentation we saw that if hitting the peak was the difference between hundreds of thousands or even millions of dollars each year, we probably wouldn't just blindly let this machine go with all of its inputs and try to hit the peak on its own. We would still want a very capable amount of software sophistication, personnel looking into all the various factors that go into play into hitting the peak. And the peak, chasing the peak is now it's been lucrative for so long that there's so many people doing it that we've had peaks in September, and the peak game is changing rapidly. And so I think the use case as demonstrated was great for a really big building or even a complex that had solar and batteries and grid power and was trying to manage all these different systems to make sure that they were as efficient as possible and maybe getting the best bang for their buck. But it didn't really translate to utility scale. And I do agree that it's worth another look, but we weren't writing it off as a result of the presentation. We still see the value and feel like it's just an inevitable place we're going to go. We just are more focused on SCADA so that we have that real-time data to feed into a microgrid controller. Obviously, we're not really tied to Eaton either. SEL makes all of our other equipment and is likely the vendor we're going to go with for SCADA. So there are systems by other companies as well. But in terms of the microgrid, I think Joe, Laura, and I are all sold that we want something that can handle in real time all of these inputs and make those decisions. It's just a matter of, do we want it now, and do we know yet what the inputs are going to be in 2 years, 3 years when we have all this equipment ready to go?
What I haven't heard, and therefore don't know the answer, is in looking at, to oversimplify, two configurations, one an expansion of what we have, and the other this different system which will replace some of it. Our charge is 10 megawatts.
Right.
In terms of next year and the year after expansion, do those two solutions provide different answers or the same answer?
Not sure quite how to answer that. I'll start with the base case, which was we put together for this article, for this year's warrant, approximately 2.5 megawatts of solar added to the system, added to the entire CMLP system. And that was the amount that we were told was something that could be comfortably added to the one bus bar that was not already at risk. So we would put this one at a place where we don't want to get any more on there, and we have to do something in order to put more solar on. So we'll fall way short of our of our goals if we don't do something like this type of system or re-engineering of the existing system with this substation reconfiguration. We have to do something in order to keep pursuing the goal that the task force and the town are out for. So we're kind of stepping into that right away, knowing that the system that we're putting stuff on needs to be upgraded.
Well, the bus issue isn't gonna be solved by going from one vendor to another, obviously. So that's gonna have to be dealt with anyway. The question is, of the two routes that seem to be on the table, what are their implications for our meeting our ultimate goal?
Um,
Are we really ready to kind of get down to that level here or what?
I'm not sure that we really need to get into that, and Charlie, I agree with that.
I'm still at the more basic level here, which is, is the light plant still planning to plow ahead with the metering domain? And if so, doesn't that take a lot of this kind of off the table for now? Is that going to be your solution to preventing some of these disasters? I know that that's top of mind for Laura and Joe and others, that you have a way to basically export on demand, on your demand, to the outside world when you need to. And I just wonder where that now fits.
Yeah, so the metering domain is still on the table. It's still a definite goal and something we're going to do. The sense that I get from Joe is that that can't happen until we have a SCADA system that's compatible with Eversource's system on the other side.
Okay.
So we need that in place at the substation. So that substation reconfiguration that Dean mentioned is in conjunction with the visibility of the usage and amount of data that we're pushing. So right now, that's a very manual process that people can get if they're there in person and they put some equipment on some lines, but it's not real-time information, and Eversource requires that before we can ever push back and reconfigure things. So the two steps are get visibility that they have access to in the format that they dictate, and then reconfigure some of the equipment and reprogram relays and switches and fuses, replace some equipment, and then we'll be in a position where the equipment will be sophisticated enough to understand that we're pushing back and it will allow it and it not trip a protection mechanism.
So what is your recommendation to us with respect to this part of the discussion? Should we pause this? Should we continue to look at it and just provide information? Is it something that we ought to try to include in the article? What's your kind of take on this?
I mean, Dean had a suggestion that we leave in money for feasibility because we know we're going to do it. We know we want this, and we're just trying to line up all these moving pieces. And so, one offer he threw out was maybe we leave the feasibility money in there so that we can continue to study this and figure out the best solution. And then when we're ready, then we go out for borrowing if it's needed. I mean, it was only $500,000, and I think other capital projects have been able to be absorbed by the capital planning process. So, it might not even require borrowing. Obviously, that depends on all these other projects that are going on. But to me, that seems like a good thing to, dictate to send the message that we agree that this is an important solution that we need eventually, but that we're not ready to buy it now, but we are definitely ready to pursue the parameters of it and understand how it's going to integrate with other systems. I mean, to me, it seems like a win if while we're doing SCADA, we always have this in mind so that we know what we need for that. So it's not like a build out of a SCADA and then it's like, oh, we look at this and like, well, if you had done this with SCADA, that would have been helpful because then you could have done this, So if we can tie those projects together, I feel like we're going to
Stay
get
one step ahead of the game.
Yeah, exactly.
I certainly support.
So
feasibility.
the proposal to put money in to study would help you dovetail with your technology uptake. In other words, you're taking up, you need to collect data. We know from talking to Eaton that this system that they're proposing, that a microgrid controller system, it it is a vacuum cleaner for data. And right now, we don't have any, we don't have enough, if any, on the system. So you need to step back one before you can be ready.
Yeah.
But it would be nice to configure your SCADA or know what you need to collect so that it would dovetail with,
Yeah.
future automation is I guess the message. And so if we leave some money in there to show that the solar task force has identified a future need, and we need to make sure that the light plan is positioned for this. But one thing that you said, Jason, that I thought was very interesting was that if the system were to cost somewhere in the $500,000 range, that could just be part of the regular capital planning process of the light plant without the need to be getting into special warrant articles and all that kind of stuff. Is that, I just want to understand that. Is that true?
Yeah, so like, for instance, for the advanced metering project, there was, a borrowing article that authorized up to a certain amount of $2 or $3 million. Wendy was probably on the board at the time, I might remember, but yeah, 3.
Yeah.
But I remember, having conversations with Dave and saying like, are we just gonna do this within our existing capital reserves, or are we gonna actually borrow this? And if so, how much? So I know that we've been setting aside capital money for SCADA for a while so that we can afford that without borrowing for SCADA. And so I think that, depending on what this looks like, it might not be something that we have to go to town meeting to get borrowing authorization for. But obviously, that's dependent on us not expending all of our other funds doing, feasibility or these studies here or this study there or other
Yep.
projects. So, but, I think obviously we'll get more detailed financial assessments from our finance team and determine what our capabilities are. We're now actually going through our strategic plan and looking at all of our projects and making sure that we have both from a project management perspective and from a resourcing perspective and from a finance perspective, have an understanding of where we're going to get all of those resources, both financial and human. So I think that this dovetails with that and provide more visibility into what we're going to need to borrow versus what we're going to be able to afford on our own. But to me, this doesn't cross a threshold where it's definitely borrowing. I mean, $6 million for the middle school or $9 million for solar, obviously we're going to need to borrow that. But a few $100,000, my sense is that might be something that can be woven into the capital plan.
Well, I guess in terms of thinking through your responses here, I'm very pleased with what you said. And I think that nothing that has been put out there in terms of what you're doing versus what we've been thinking for these use cases, none of this stuff is incompatible. And I think that staying one step ahead of the game is exactly where it's at with this stuff, because you've got to keep looking forward and seeing what the other pieces are that haven't been discovered. So I think that's all very good news for me. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay.
So,
Yeah.
so what were you thinking around feasibility? Because you now have to work on this presentation, so.
Well,
we need to agree on something.
my thinking on feasibility is for some tier of 1 to 2 different assessments.
Yeah.
One assessment is, what level of battery capacity are we gonna need to just mitigate where we are? Like, that's a study that could be done to tell us, okay, if you put this many batteries on and you have an automatic controller, you can mitigate without having to get into metering domain. You're gonna save yourself in a lot of ways. And if the batteries are available for protection during these windows of these shoulder windows, that's one study, which is like kind of a, ceteris paribus. The system is what it is. If you add battery, what kind of protection and mitigation does that provide? The other is kind of turn the crank and go forward as we electrify, as we're doing more, people are putting in heat pumps, they're driving more electric cars, we're just using more electricity. How does that shift our needs, and what kinds of systems or extra battery or whatever we want to think of? So that's a secondary kind of look, which is like planning for the future as we go out. And that could mean looking at stresses on a feeder line or, whatever. Are we literally at points where individual individual circuits need to be fully upgraded or, you know, but that's beyond the solar task force.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
So
We're
anyway,
far
that's the
away.
kind of, those are kinds of things I think we would end up studying.
So do we need agreement on how much you wanna,
Uh,
what dollar should we
I-
have?
When the original 600,000 plug
Right.
number was constructed, it was constructed in consultation with the folks from Eaton. And they had suggested that these kinds of front end studies would probably cost somewhere between 50 and 100. And then the system itself would cost somewhere in the $500,000 range. So, 50 to 100, okay, let's put 100.
Okay.
And then
So
up to 500,000, so then you end up with 600.
Yeah, okay.
So
Okay.
am I right? Isn't that Charlie? Is that, have I got that just
Yeah,
about
well,
right?
I would be a little bit open-ended about this because we may want to include more capability to do some demonstration work to really understand what these technologies can do, rather than just talking about them and looking at slides, and you know, and basically collecting data. It might be
Right.
nice to see, you know, some sort of low-level proof of concept that you know could show us, you know, make us more comfortable with some of the directions that could come out of this. But I think we're good with the, you know, with the basic notion of feasibility at, let's say, 100,000. Although I wouldn't peg it to the description that they provided. I think we need to really redo the
I
way
think so.
the thing that
Yeah.
they wrote up. It's got a lot of kind of oddities to it, and I think we need to kind of customize it to what the light plant wants.
If we do a study, which makes sense, could that study include at least a preliminary study of how a particular configuration that's recommended will lead to a tripling of the solar power over the next few years?
Well, we'll get into that in a minute, but it doesn't seem like what we're really driving towards is tripling our solar power. You know, you'd have to have an explosion of private installations. And then what we feel we can do within the context of a light plant, open available land that we can put it on, et cetera. Tripling is probably a stretch.
Well, if we're charged with 10 megawatts,
Yeah.
it means one way or the other, if we do our job, we will recommend a way of getting there, whether it's
Yeah,
private
but-
or public.
But 10 is, we're already at 7.5.
Right.
And the middle school is gonna add 1.5. So that's 9, and we wanna get to 20. So all we need to do is build 11, and that's not tripling. I mean, I don't know.
Okay,
I'm just, you know, so.
stand corrected.
Yep.
The issue's the same.
Well, that's a good segue though to the next agenda item.
It is, it is.
So we're agreeing that you got 100 grand that you're likely plugging.
I
Just wanna make it clear,
I'm-
you can move on.
I'm gonna just
Okay.
stay with that number
Yeah,
and
okay,
we'll work
we're
with
just
that.
wanna make sure.
And then,
For now,
and then,
for now.
yeah, for now. Now, before we leave this agenda topic, we're talking, Laura and I had an exchange and we had a tentative agreement to have E&E come in and give us a 15-minute presentation or some kind of presentation on what their outsourced battery service is. So we would, as a solar task force, would understand what that is, because that can be also potentially be a stopgap between a fully automated system.
Yeah.
And, you know, we can keep going if we contract with them to do it while we
Right.
catch up, building a SCADA system, collecting enough data, and then eventually getting to automation. We can use a potential outsource service from E&E
Yeah.
as a way of managing these batteries. So, because we had to juggle and change these meeting dates, I kind of kicked that can down the road. We may be able to get E&E in here to give us that presentation for our next meeting. I'll have to consult with Laura and see if we can get them back around. We had settled on the 7th, but then I pulled back and said, no, we're not using the 7th because there's all these conflicts. So I pushed that off. So anyway, that's kind of the short story on the E&E battery service, is that we will get a presentation on that, and they've agreed to do it. So it's all good. And now that is a good segue to report base structure, emphasis points. And Charlie, I'm going to turn it over to you because you've been working hard on this.
Oh, well, I don't know that working on some things here. I think that one of the questions we need to kind of net out, or we need to kind of get, finish and answer, is with respect to the sites. I don't know whether this is what you had in mind, Dean, but with respect to the sites that we're going to pursue. And by pursue, I mean the sites that we feel are feasible enough to enable us to, continue to develop these opportunities and include them in let's say, a presentation to town meeting. And I think that one thought is that the candidate list is fairly narrow, and we ought to recognize it as such, and we ought to kind of settle that we kind of know how much solar we can add in Concord on Concord town-owned land. And quite frankly, I think the town deserves to know what our conclusion is on that point by town meeting. I don't think this is a complicated question. The number of available sites that can handle, that are feasible for solar, like I say, is quite limited. And if you basically cut away all of the canopy opportunities and basically say canopies are off the list because they're too expensive, you drop down to rooftops. And I think that we're potentially reaching the conclusion point that not only are rooftops expensive, they're complicated. And there may not be much of them left in town anyway to enable us to basically pursue the rooftop as a viable part of the candidate pool, which basically leaves us with a list of 6 or 7. And I can read those off to you from the ones that seem to be hanging out there as somewhat valid and somewhat open. And those are MCI Concord,
Yeah, okay.
Concord landfill, CCH has drainage basins, which we haven't dropped yet, 2229 Main Street, the filter beds, and the Amendalia agricultural field. Now, if you add all those up, you get about 9. You could get as much as 9 megawatts. And I say, you could get, because we don't really know, because we haven't done the analysis of each site in a pinpoint way to kind of get a better number relative to each of these sites. But I think that's probably the candidate pool that's left. And I think that kind of settling on that point and finishing that part of our research and basically declaring victory is something that's valid. And I do feel that we've been over the financials, and I think that the sense of the committee, I do believe, is that we shouldn't be spending town capital to create solar that loses money. Now, if we did want to disagree with that point, if we're comfortable spending money, to cover the losses, so to speak, on the solar that we create, when in fact we have solar outside of Concord that we can develop through E&E, then that's a decision the committee could make. But I would say, well, not so sure that that's the direction we want to take. And I would simply put it to the committee: where are we at on this? Are we ready to close this out and get our act together with respect to finishing this part of the job, or do we want to keep it open?
What is the role of large private sector opportunities?
Well, that's not part of this.
Yeah.
Part of this.
Right.
Well, I think that it's a good question. I think that what we're trying to do as a committee, if I may speak to that, I think we're trying to do the town-owned land piece, which is very important. That's what we were set up for: solar on town-owned land. And at the same time, we want to create the policies and infrastructure that allows the town to continue to pursue the build out of solar on private owned land, but through private owners, through private capital, not through our capital. So yeah, we want to do both, but I don't think that we need to include some amount of definitive sites with respect to you know, private development in this question here.
My thought is slightly different. If we don't label the sites for the private sector, which is a larger number anyway, should we, in our goal, decide what our goal should be on the percentage of the new capacity that should be aiming at the private sector?
But let's think, if we think of it in a different way, I think the way we might want to think about it is, how can we set the light plant up to be able to accept energy from, or accept solar on private land? It could be a behind the meter system, but when it's extremely variable, and 1 minute the cloud goes by and 300 Baker Avenue has a very large array, 1 minute it's producing a ton, and the next minute, but the building still needs just as much energy, then that's going to create problems for the light plant. So I think our goal is to enable the light plant distribution system to be able to accept that additional solar without impacting the system or creating potential.
It
solar.
sounds to me like we should have some kind of a capacity or target for the private sector, so that the planning can include some significant capacity.
Well, I think,
Yeah.
I think there's some nuances here that you got to kind of get into. One is the behind the meter, in front of the meter question. If somebody wants to donate their land to Concord, it's private land, but they want to donate it to Concord, and they want to have a direct connect to our system. And you know, they want to give all the power over, and you know, and you know, they want, even if they wanted to allow us to make the investment, and we probably would, that would be you know, an acceptable way to go about adding to capacity. But I'm not sure we need to include that in here. I'm not sure that it's necessary to be explicit about that. I think the other side of the coin is the behind the meter stuff, and we simply want that to happen. We want the system to have enough flexibility and be welcoming enough to allow all kinds of behind the meter things to develop without us having to say, no, we can't do that because you need to have storage, or no, you can't do that because the feeder lines are insufficient, or whatever. We want to get
That's exactly why I'm suggesting that this be part of our planning, to plan for the accommodation of exactly what you've said.
okay.
I'm not sure that we're in
Yeah,
a
we
technical, I'm not sure that we're in a technical position to make assessments about.
On a side-by-side basis.
Yeah.
Two points. One, Charlie, to go back to your very important point. Our goal is to develop solar for the town, which is financially feasible,
Right.
that doesn't create a loss. In essence, if we look at our mission statement, it's not about develop anything.
That's
It's
right.
develop something on town-owned land that is financially feasible.
Right.
And when it's not, whether it's a roof or a canopy, that actually pulls it out of even if it's town-owned land, but if it's not feasible, it's not a candidate. It's not part of our solution.
Is it limited to town-owned land?
It's all, well, hang
Well,
on.
let's
Our
just
mission
start-
statement is town-owned land,
Right.
right? So let's look at that piece first. We can have an advocacy that says we want to encourage private solar, but then it's also, before we advocate for that, we also want to make sure that the system, to the Dean's point, can accept it and be
That's why I'm
responsible.
raising the
We're being
question.
responsible about our solar saturation. We don't want to make it worse by encouraging everyone to make it worse.
Mm-hmm.
Right, but if the big question is, look, we need 11 and we don't think we have enough land and all we can get is 9, then we're gonna say, all we can get is 9 town that's financially feasible. If you want us to hit 11, how much money do you wanna lose to get there?
You get,
Our
get there.
our charter says assess the goal,
That's the goal.
because
That's
it
what
may
is.
not be
Yeah.
feasible.
Right,
Right.
So
Yeah.
I think that's.
So, but to Phil's point, I'm not sure we want to engage in like a system-wide capacity
No, that's-
modeling exercise. I don't know that we have the tools.
right.
Yeah.
I don't know that we have the tools to do a
Or-
system-wide
Yeah.
capacity modeling exercise. We are sidling up to the problem of solar saturation
Mhm.
only anecdotally. We don't have real good data about it. We don't have a tremendous amount of real-time information, as Jason pointed out. We have very few actual tools to understand when we're in trouble. So I hear you, Phil. Obviously, you don't wanna be in a position where people are chomping at the bit to put more energy on the system and build their own solar on top of their roofs, and we have to tell them no. I don't think we wanna be in that position. We wanna try to help the distribution system be welcoming. But I'm not sure that this committee has the engineering and specific skill set to make that assessment. That's all.
Nor is it really required of us to make that assessment.
That's right.
I think if we, I like to use the word take a step back. We take a step back on the charge. The charge calls out the fact that we need to address solar on town-owned land. That's part of the charge. And I think that requires us to identify the town-owned land parcels that are going to be targets for solar and to qualify those targets. Now, if we want to finish that part of the discussion, then that would, and if we can finish that part of the discussion and come up with the final list, that's good. And then after that, we can move on to other topics like, solar on private land, which is a separate question. Really a separate question.
So in terms of these locations, I think we've talked about them many times.
Yeah.
So I think we can
Yeah.
agree that these five are,
Yeah.
the open mind for me, MCI, I don't know if we can even go there right now, and.
Well, between now and 2030.
Well, we can't go
Yeah, but I'm
They
just
go to
saying,
Shut
so-
it down this
either.
year, in the middle of the year.
No, I know, but
Yeah,
it's
but-
gonna be a multi-year planning process.
Oh, yes.
And there's gonna be a lot of visioning and blah, blah, blah.
Oh,
I
yeah.
mean, so I
How are
think
you
we
gonna
can
put
say,
how are you gonna put a number of panels to it?
well, yeah, but all I'm gonna.
They
all I'm
have a
gonna
half
say is,
acre over there
we know
now.
where concretely we can put solar, and we can say, there's these great opportunities out
Right.
here. And it must be ground mounted, if you
Right.
want to be cost effective, that's the
Right,
important message. And that would be necessary if the town wants to achieve their 20
Yeah.
Okay.
goal, because otherwise the goal's gonna be something less.
But if you were saying town-owned land that we control right now,
Right,
this
then
goes
your
back to-
MCI and
then the
229
MCI
off.
drops off and
And
229
229's off.
drops off.
Right.
I'll say too, so.
No, I wouldn't drop those. I wouldn't drop
Yeah,
those.
no, I know, but
We're just trying to bucket it so that land that we're fully in control of, that we could act on financially correctly now is one bucket. The next bucket is, here are identified properties in which the town has a vested interest and may become available and
Mhm.
may become financial. Right, there's a few more megawatts there. And then at that point, you're still short.
You're
Right.
short and you end
Which
up.
is
with-
okay. Nobody ever told us that we couldn't be short.
But it's a
Right.
surprise. I mean, part
That's
of our message
We
is
wanna find out
assessing
for
that
sure.
target,
Right.
right?
so-
Because
Also-
if it's not cost effective for the.
Gavin has a
that's
comment.
Yeah,
important.
so
Yeah.
this was sort of like, I guess, it's part of the report I'll be working on. And I think in terms of our decision-making process, so far, what I've shown in PowerPoint, for example, is only the ground-mounted sites.
Right.
So although there are potentially some good roof-mounted and potentially some canopy, only a few, that if we were to pair them with a battery, they could become very economically feasible. So I think we have to consider that in mind is,
We have to, because we're selling this warrant article. on the
Yeah,
fact that we're
So
putting-
and
let's,
sorry, I was gonna say too, that to Charlie's original point, any estimate that we would have would likely be very rough on how much solar can be built in the town. Because every site, we would make an estimation on how much would be built. So I don't know necessarily if we're gonna have a pretty rough number, I think, if we do have a number. I don't know if it's worth it having it by the town meeting, or if it's worth it having it in our report timeline. So that's something on the deadline was a little
well,
abrupt.
the goal at town, I think some of the goals for town meeting are just to kind of keep the town apprised of where we are in this report, and it's a kind of bright line we're probably not doing canopies. We're not doing canopies. And people expect to see a canopy over on the high school
I know.
parking lot. Everybody you talk to
I
goes,
keep-
why aren't you doing a parking canopy over here? They have me here, and
There's a
here.
couple.
And you just go, we will be just basically standing in the parking lot, burning money, you know, if
Yeah.
you want us to do that, we can probably do that, but that's probably not helpful.
If you'd like to donate them.
That's an option too.
I haven't heard anything about the nuclear medicine site.
2229. We don't
We-
own it yet.
We don't own it.
Yeah.
I got outreach, didn't put it in my chair's report. I got you from, a fellow named Feely, John Feely, I think his name is.
Yeah.
Frank Feely, who is on the committee, and they're looking at like, how much land would you like, and what do you expect, and et cetera. So I sent him some feedback and said, you know, we would only really be considering ground mount over there. So
Sure.
really what I would think.
But it's a significant amount, right?
Yeah, I would like several acres to put some ground mount over there.
Megawatts.
Yeah, we guessed at 2 megawatts, which is really, that's like 5 acres. That's a lot.
Do batteries make
You
rooftop more
may
economical?
think it's a lot, but you may think it's a lot, but the fact that we're doing this exercise puts that parcel into perspective. Because,
Right.
you know, if you just say, well, we're continuing to look for parcels and we want to do stuff that's only a couple years out and so forth and so on, it's always going to look like such a small number that you're never going to be able to make your number. And then you have no ability to push back on 2229 for how they fit into this whole thing.
Right.
So I think that if we want to do the 11 megawatts, I think we've got to think boldly, and we've got to get these prospects in there, even though they're not town owned and even though they're not sort of solid. We got to get them in there for the outside, the long part of the time horizon, because if we don't, you know, we don't
It'll be
start
gone.
Yeah,
don't start
I
you know,
agree with that.
pushing it, you don't start pushing it, you're never going to get there.
So I want to come back to Gavin's point, which
Yeah.
is, you know, if we look at these as standalone projects, your standalone roof project or a standalone canopy project, they don't really pay. They cost.
Right.
And the question then is, if you pair them with a battery, do they then pay? And
Or do they pay more than buying power in the future?
right, so the question there, I think, really rolls around on what are the economics of battery? The economics of battery, if it's just paired with solar, and if you had a power wall in your garage, you know, you would take the electricity off your roof and you'd sort of like carefully store it, because you don't want to push it back out and do net metering. You're gonna carefully store it, and then you're gonna use it. You're basically doing arbitrage right against
Yeah, right.
against a light plant, you know?
Right.
That's small dollars. You're not gonna make a lot of money on just arbitraging a few extra kilowatt hours that you've cashed away and then released later. You're not. We only can make money on these batteries by doing this deferral of ISO peak
Yeah.
behavior, where the ISO is stressed and we draw down our peak. We move ourselves down. That's how we make money. So I don't know that if you were to just talk about a battery sitting next to a solar farm, that really makes it any more valuable. The batteries are very expensive. The one we're proposing is 2.6 million, I think. And that it takes a lot to pay that back, and you're not gonna make it on that arbitrage money. It's not.
It's
not
worse
there.
than that though, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because over time, the ability to realize, you know, lots of money off of cap and trans changes. And it can become significantly less opportunistic for us to pursue. Because you know, as that becomes more diffuse, as everybody's playing the game, you know, the ability to go capitalize on that changes. So I don't think that I'm agreeing with Dean, but for another reason. I don't think that batteries actually do make, over the life of a 20-year project, make these sites somehow turn a Salzier into a silk purse, so to speak.
The question of whether we can make money on cap and trans with a battery also kind of plays into the state of Massachusetts Clean Peak Standard, which is they're trying to get all kinds of incentives in place to get people to draw down. When the ISO is at its peak, that's the time at which you really want clean energy to be entering the mix. So if you're dispatching from a battery, that is considered clean energy. It came from somewhere else and it's clean. And so we would be helping the ISO, even if we aren't absolutely gonna make a ton of money on it, we would be helping the ISO and helping the state meet its clean peak, goals.
Coming back to where I was with the talk I was giving here, though. I mean,
Yeah, sure. I'm sorry to get you way off track.
well, I didn't, it wasn't about storage. I was trying to focus, I'm willing to move on, but we're talking about trying to put a collar on what we can do for town-owned sites and basically calling it a day. I mean, for how long are we going to keep this chapter open in the book? And I think that we ought to have a horizon that's respectable in terms of implementing these projects. Maybe that goes out 10 years. Maybe it goes to 2035. I know we said 2030, but maybe it goes to 2035. And that this is what we think we could reasonably do by 2035 is 9, but no more than 9. Otherwise, we're in the business of punishing ourselves, looking for things that aren't there. And I think we know what the universe for these opportunities looks like. I think we know that now. If someone's got some stuff hidden up their sleeve, we'd sure like to know about it. But if you're looking for big stuff here, these are the big ones that will get you to 9. And I don't think we can afford to do little ones.
Well,
Do we want to pursue
From our
this, or do we want
discussion-
to drop it?
from our discussion, it seems like our definition can be town-owned and potentially town-owned land. For instance.
Right,
Star-
like Star Met, yeah.
Yeah.
That's what this is. This is all.
Yeah.
This is all town-owned land today, or will be town-owned land to be eligible in the future. That's totally understood. Yes.
Okay,
Yeah,
But, and I agree with Steve, that we should split
we
that.
just split it in
What-
half. That's,
Yeah.
it's,
Get what's
you know,
potential owned and
and then,
owned, and let's be
Yep.
clear,
right,
I mean,
and then there's the shortfall, and the bottom line is we're anticipating a shortfall in that goal.
We can't see more than 9 right now between now and 2035.
Right.
And we
I would just say, having looked at the sites closely, I think if you're looking out to 2035, especially with decreases in solar prices, expected of
maybe
the product
that
and stuff
works.
like that,
Right.
I think there are actually a few, like just off the top of my head, Alcott School, Thoreau School, where their roofs are pretty large area where solar could be good on those, and there could be incentives or grants because it's a school, things like that.
Right,
So I think we should keep those ones in mind. So I don't think we know now that it's 9. I mean, maybe this isn't for next meeting. I can walk through some of the.
well, it's true, the
Yeah.
economics will be changing.
Right, the
Right.
market changed, the economics could change, there's other factors, and you're basically saying, we know there's other sites, but at today's
Prices,
prices, incentives, anything else that we've identified, this is where we're stopping. And if later
To
on,
put a finer point. on that,
These are the big. These are what I tried to isolate out were the big, the big ground mount opportunities, because ground mount is economically feasible, and
today's conditions,
it's got the scale that you need, and
So
blah,
to put
blah.
a finer point on Steve's sentence, he said, oh, future prices, future incentives. We are only making these work with the current IRA incentives.
Yeah.
They otherwise just wouldn't even work.
Yeah,
I don't think they would work.
They
yeah,
barely
and
do.
that's
So-
key to our.
But yeah,
Yeah.
so
Yeah,
we either keep those IRA incentives or some new, better incentives
Yeah.
come along, but.
Well,
those are
that
pretty
is
big.
true. I mean, the other collar we should put on this is that, that the candidate list is going to be, is going to increase or decrease based on, available incentives, and those may change over current conditions, but based on current conditions, I don't know, this is kind of the list.
if you look at the pressure.
I would have to say, I would like to walk through a few of the other like roof mounted ones, because we haven't done thorough enough analysis in my
Yeah.
mind of those sites to totally eliminate them.
I
Yeah,
mean, the private ones.
Well,
Yeah,
when are you
no,
gonna have your
so-
analysis? When is your
smaller-
analysis gonna be? I guess I would just ask the question without being rude about it. When is the analysis gonna be finished? So we can get it behind us and be done with it.
So let.
No, I think that's it's a valid question,
Okay.
Dean. You know, we gotta.
No,
we gotta put
I'm
color
not,
on
I'm
this
not
stuff.
trying to put your question off, I'm trying to put it in a different way, that's all, it's the same question. I think, Gavin, what you're saying is, there are good-sized roofs where, you know, potential 0.5 megawatt installations could be done,
Mhm.
okay? And so that makes them at least target installations.
Mhm.
The question that needs to really be part of that is, we've identified that they cost $250 a watt to build up there. It doesn't matter whether it's CCHS or Alcott, it's gonna cost $250 a watt. And when we've run the numbers, Wendy and I have run the numbers, this is just not financially beneficial. I mean,
50% more.
It's not quite 50, but you know, you're going
Nearly.
from 150 to 250, but it's more. So I don't know how, even though they're nice, large opportunities, I don't know how that brings it into financial viability. You know, as Steve pointed out, we're trying to find things that are financially viable, that are good.
Yeah, I guess my question is, so now we're deciding based on the financial modeling that no other roof mounted site or solar canopy would
Yeah.
exist.
And
We wouldn't recommend it.
we'll get to
Yeah.
this, but when we come to the warrant discussion, which is the last thing on here, you know, what am I doing at town meeting and what am I doing in the hearing? I'm of the mind that the school is off the table. It's not worth it. I
I was
mean,
gonna
we're
ask
doing
you
all
this
this work.
question. It works if it's together, right? But when we start breaking them apart, it doesn't. So
Yeah.
I guess that's my question.
You
If
know-
we're gonna start landing this message, then
Yeah.
do we take that, we should take the roof?
We're not there. I mean, we've got all this
Right.
legal paperwork and we have
Yeah.
to line up all these vendors and then we have to go through and I'm not gonna be in a position to say anything until like a week before town meeting. And I'm not comfortable. I'm ready to take it and say, hey, if we have a fall town meeting and we have a longer drawn out process, maybe we'll bring it. Maybe we'll bring it in the fall special town meeting or whatever. But right now, I'm at least on the roof. Now, you know, we could talk about the landfill, which is, again, we don't
Also
have
risky,
any, we're
right.
nowhere on the landfill. We're just nowhere. So, but, anyway, so
yeah.
Charlie,
No, I might have come across rude. I didn't mean to, but I think the point about a lot of this stuff is it's kind of late in the cycle to be, you know, firing up analyses. I think that we should know a lot of this stuff by now. And if we don't, we should recognize that there's a problem here and that we got to get through this. We got to get through it quickly. You know, I respect the fact that more people have to look at stuff more times, but
Yeah, what
basics are just not gonna, basics just are not gonna change that much. I mean, what is in front of us is in front of us.
Yeah, my worry is that in terms of we want to be comprehensive, and I think the process of identifying the ground mounted worked when we walked through the sites live. It was time intensive, but it worked.
Yeah.
So my worry is that if we don't do that, even briefly for the other alternatives,
I'm happy to walk through it. I'm gonna go in with a prejudice that we know it's
Yeah.
250 a watt. to
We
build.
do, no, we
Okay with
know
that.
without looking at a single one, we know what the story is there because we can't afford to do.
Yeah,
Unless
so-
you want to change, unless the committee wants to change its perspective on this and decide that we're willing to ask the town to subsidize underwater solar projects. That is an okay, perfectly okay position to take, that we think solar is so important that we should out of the tax side of the equation or out of the ratepayer side of the equation, we should pay over the top for projects that don't clear, you know, the hurdle by the 20-year mark.
Not if we haven't looked at alternatives.
Right.
I wouldn't do that, because,
No,
yeah.
because they're
But
talking about
You what?
alternatives.
I forgot. I didn't hear what you said.
I was gonna, we should be looking at alternatives, so to the point of leasing land on a, you know, that's outside the town, but granted, that's not in town.
Yeah.
But if we wanna meet that goal, that's one of the things that we might need to be considering, but,
Well,
you know, Gavin, you
we're already
just-
doing that though. We're already leasing town land through ENE, right? So that's already there.
Leasing what?
E&E has these projects that
There are community solar projects
Right,
that we participate in,
Yeah.
Oh,
way
yeah,
off,
that's,
way off
yeah,
site.
yeah, well, that's different, yeah.
Well, I think this is a good point, Wendy. I mean, because, you know, if we're not on the same page on this stuff, we ought to figure out how to do that. Because,
Yeah,
you know, I obviously am not, maybe I'm on the outside fringes here, but,
I mean, one thing we can do is,
I think we're gonna do our best to get to the 11, and I don't think there's any mandate to do anything to get us there that isn't what comes out of common sense.
yeah, I just wanna make sure that we're thorough. I mean, I'm happy to send these slides out so we can all look at it on our
Yeah.
own time,
Yeah.
but I
Yeah.
just wanna make sure we all have a chance to look at them.
Why don't we do this? Gavin can send out his slides. I think it would be helpful for us to know what he's identified that's out there, what approximate scale each of those roofs are that you've identified. And I know that you also had identified parking lots, but I don't even think that's really worth talking about.
Yeah,
I mean,
that
it's
was
just
probably
like.
not-
not worth
How does a place like Acton Boxborough, like, how do they put their solar canopy then? How do they
Okay,
make it
so the
work?
way those work, the way those tend to work is that Eversource has a mass save program of some sort
Yeah.
that allows for the utility itself to help underwrite the construction of such a thing.
Okay.
And so they get into a relationship where Eversource actually builds the thing, and then they get into a relationship where they're selling the content, like a PPA, back to the school in some way. I don't really know exactly how they all work, but it's a
Subsidized
it's a
installation.
subsidized
Yeah.
installation. It's a heavily subsidized.
Couldn't CMLP do
Well,
that
actually,
same thing?
Actually, there's another part to that equation, and it's the fact that the ISOs charge a huge amount of money for their electricity.
That's
So
also true.
it's very easy to stand up these projects when the value of energy to them is so different than it is to us.
30% more for electricity from a regular Eversource than it does from CMLP.
Yeah.
We just don't have,
So
we don't have. any
they get to cover that up in a nanosecond, right?
Yeah.
Furthermore, they have the RPS where they're punished with penalties for not doing these projects,
Oh, yeah, for not doing it.
Yeah.
They have to do it.
financially punished, right?
Yep.
But back to our roof mount, is there a middle road, namely, we can hope with the battery that we'll break even from our discussion, but can we hedge it by having a clause subject to confirming our economic feasibility? Can we?
Well, the thing about this is, in the process of, working through the sites that we've already worked through, we've done a lot of that spade work. We have a lot of good information about the paybacks on these things. And it's not rocket science. I mean, it's very straightforward.
No, but from what
cash flow.
I heard today is we're unsure as to whether we can break even at the rooftop of the high school, for instance.
I'm not unsure. We're never gonna break even.
Oh, we know that. We have the answer to that one.
Yeah,
Right,
even with the
right.
battery, we're
Well,
not
no,
sure.
it,
No, with,
But you
coupled
battery-
with the battery is a project, yes, but not.
but the payback on the battery
it's
is
different.
based on our benefit to the ISO
So,
reductions.
right.
That, it's a benefit to the light plant's assessment reduction. It doesn't have anything to do with the solar on the roof. It's not like
Well,
we're
it-
saving money by storing the energy and putting it back in the.
Well, it does is that the size of the battery will be affected by whether we have to store energy from the rooftop.
No,
No,
not.
independent.
It's independent.
We can
Completely
use it for
independent.
anything,
Yeah, it's
anything,
not- not
so.
So the bottom line is that the roof or canopy, in essence, has to be subsidized somehow to
Right.
bring it anywhere near being
And the
sustainable.
IRA subsidization is not enough.
It's not enough.
And that's huge to begin
Right,
with,
yeah.
that's huge.
So we're
Right.
saying right now,
It's not
that's a
cost
no,
effective,
but
standalone.
I mean, that might be something to talk about.
Well, but I would say that if the town ever created another full building, our recommendation that it be
Built for it.
structured
Right.
and to fully accept panels, everything would have to be there.
What
Scales
you
or
would
something like
probably
that,
do
yeah.
in that case
Yeah.
is you would build the building, include the solar panels in the building construction and put it behind the meter.
Right.
And the energy would flow right into the building and it would be a credit to the town. And it would be part of the building the actual building of the building. As opposed to this other weird thing where the light plant is trying to make a buck on some energy that it's
Yeah.
draining off the roof. That's one of the reasons this doesn't work so well, Gavin, on these roofs, is because the light plant is comparing the energy value that it can generate to what it would pay to just buy the energy from the ISO New England. And that number is a very low
Very low
number.
number.
It's not a big
Yeah.
number.
Yeah.
And so therefore the light plant is like, how does this
Yeah.
work for me
Yeah.
financially?
Yeah.
Whereas a homeowner who has to pay 16, 18 cents
Right.
for, a built up kilowatt,
Yeah.
when you get all the little charges built in there, it's 16,
It makes a
18
difference.
cents. It, it starts to make more sense.
Oh, yeah.
Uh,
So I guess the other point of reviewing the roofs is, there is something to be said, if those roofs get replaced. There might be some information that these buildings, should the roof be replaced, should.
Yeah, there's like 3 or 4 I've included in this that the roofs are gonna be replaced soon.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so it might be a
Not this
project that you do when you do a roof replacement, you
Right.
consider doing a solar project that the building benefits from through a behind the meter system
Yeah.
at the time of a roof
Yeah.
replacement. That might be a possible thing we can
That
consider.
would,
At least-
that would
but
count toward the in-town.
It
goal.
makes a statement about
Like beating.
Yeah,
the
yeah.
Right,
other
yeah.
possibilities that could
Yeah.
exist in the world.
Right, so it's
Yeah.
not a light plant
Right.
thing. The
Yeah.
light plant's not
Right.
building that. Like if Alcott needs his roof replaced,
Or
we do
BD or
we,
something.
or BD,
Yeah, right.
we do a budgetary capital program that's a town project.
Right.
And then the town benefits by having reduced electricity cost at that facility.
Yeah.
Right, yeah.
So that would be a
Yes,
different
ma'am.
algorithm, a totally different calculation, I
Yeah.
So
think,
the other thing I want to be absolutely clear, that all the light plant power right now is green power.
Yes,
Offset
in
the
an
rest,
accounting
right,
way,
yeah,
in
yeah,
a
yeah.
green eye shade kind of way, yeah.
Well, from the
In an accounting
sustainability,
perspective.
from the sustainability aspect, aside from the financial one,
Yeah.
the desire to be sustainable and to have our power be green has already been met.
It is, right, we did.
It
It was
de-
supposed to be at the end of
it
last
depends on,
year.
but some people would say
Yeah.
there are problems with Rex.
Right, no,
But that's the
but-
account, yeah.
But the goal is not for us to generate all our own power.
I mean, it
On
could be
town land,
that-
we can't.
Big green.
So that's another thing. We're only looking at it from the financial perspective.
Right.
Another one is, does Concord want to be more reliable on its own? So if the power ever cut, we could get
Yeah,
the
well,
solar.
that's your result.
And would the town be willing to subsidize solar that's under for that? That's, I think
Yeah,
we might have
to get to
a,
net zero.
the section, the
No,
report might need
that's
to
a whole,
have
that's
that.
a whole separate business.
Right, but all I'm saying is there's some assumptions when we go into this, that there are goals that are being met. Some of them have already been met since this original
Right.
Yeah.
thing had been started. That should be noted in the report. And then there's a series of other things after that say, well, there are other things that we are aware of that we're not addressing that may change future actions in this,
Right.
type of
Well,
thing, so.
You said something that I thought was not the case. Concord buys its power from a combination of renewable and non-renewable resources. So
Right.
it's not green power.
But it's offset by
But
rec.
it's offset.
By
There,
renewable.
there's a.
Well,
there's
that's a
whole-
separate, that's a whole
Separate.
day's worth of discussion.
In a two-sentence thing.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, Charlie, you're gonna have to put up with me for a second, for Phil's benefit.
Yeah.
Right,
Okay, every kilowatt that gets generated by a generating thing, whether it's a coal plant, a gas plant, or a solar panel, every kilowatt hour that's generated has a record made in a database. Okay, when we consume electricity, it's a fungible thing. We're just consuming kilowatt hours.
Right.
We need to get accounting for what kinds of kilowatt hours did we consume? So we go to that database and we purchase all the little records that said green.
Huh.
That's how it's done.
That's how it's done.
yeah.
That's how it's done.
There's a
Okay.
serial
How did I
number,
do, Charlie?
serial number
Only
for
takes a
each
second.
kilowatt.
Only takes a second.
Okay, so moving right along, let's not get stuck on certain things here. I guess we didn't agree a whole lot on this narrowing the list, but maybe we did.
Okay, I think we did.
Yeah, I mean,
I
we-
think in general, I think Gavin's point about these roofs, we might have some alternative scenario where we do a roof replacement and the town takes on, we.
Well, this has to be written up in a report where we say things that are explicit. It can't be like, well, it's gotta be pretty well
No, I think we can
bounded
say
by the English language.
based on the financial, based on the financial results of our analysis, ground mounted systems are the only ones that remain viable for the light plant to build for its own energy creation.
Yeah.
And other town-owned buildings, as capital investment by the town, may become viable at the time of roof replacement for behind-the-meter systems that feed energy directly to the building for energy offset
Right.
purposes.
Yeah.
We don't have to
That
do the
doesn't count,
calculations.
doesn't count towards our goals. It's just a nice thing.
Doesn't
to-
count,
No, it doesn't.
doesn't count towards our
Just
goal.
acknowledging that there's a,
Those wouldn't
No,
count.
that's fine, that's fine, that's fine.
Right.
We have
have to
to,
think
we
about
have to
that.
make sure that
Because it's
we,
coming out of a different pocket, the
Right.
taxpayer will pay for the capital
Right.
as opposed to the ratepayer.
If
So,
we take
good question.
the most advantageous roof, and it's probably a question of scale, so it's probably the high school. With inclusion of battery, how close are we to break even?
I think with the inclusion of battery as a standalone function that is really serving the solar panels, we're farther away.
No, as part of their share of a broader use of batteries, those, the battery doesn't care where it's
let's just
coming
put the
from.
CMS thing in total perspective. The CMS thing has got to be totally underwater if you look at it from a practical point of view. Because they've got enormous exposure to financials on the canopy side. 3 times what it costs to build, on the ground. And they've got the same exposure on the roof. Now, to the extent that you could make all that up with a battery is beyond me. I mean, that's physics that just doesn't work.
Well,
That's Jason.
I'm not, I think that's water over the dam.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
But,
so,
It is water over the
Still-
dam, and I mean, we've been discussing these topics, so
I
the
know.
discussion of the topics, in the first hour apply to the second hour, so the same truths are applicable.
Right. Now, we've spent a fairly healthy amount of time, and I need to get to the last agenda item, which is that before we meet again, I'm going to be in front of the hearing, well, it's not the hearing, but I'm gonna be in front of the finance committee, and then the hearing is on the 19th. We will get an opportunity to meet. Will we? No,
No,
oh, we will
no.
not, because we're meeting on the 20th.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna be in front of that hearing. And I need a crisp set of points.
Yeah.
Okay? So I think Charlie's points about here's the land opportunities that we've identified, okay? The points about the article are, hey, we came with some ground mount opportunities. We added in this opportunity here on a roof because we were sort of pushed into it. I'm ready to take all of them off the table, because it's not financially viable at the school, and we're nowhere. We don't have a
Solid
vendor.
information yet.
We don't have a vendor in hand. We've got legal agreements going through, rotations. And I'm not ready to talk about that, and it's not financially viable. So I'm ready to pull that back. On the landfill, that is very touch and go.
Yeah.
Do I pull that back also? We're very touch and go there,
Well, you've got one less strike against us with the landfill, don't we?
Yeah, one less. Well, I mean, we don't have
We don't have
the administrative back and
Yeah,
forth with
right.
another committee,
Yeah.
but we still don't have an engaged company even doing the feasibility yet.
Feasibility.
And now we've been, we've anticipated a 2-week turnaround, but I will not be going in front of the finance committee with that information.
Because you're left with having to pull it at the very last minute,
Yeah.
and
So-
that may not be.
Can we,
Considering
So what do
closing the whole
I
thing.
just,
I mean, I just.
I
wonder
could
if
either move nothing, I could say we're not moving.
Right.
Right.
I could say we're moving a battery and the 100K. That's kind of my thinking right now.
People
is
say,
we-
but we're just doing solar. What happened? What do you do?
Yeah, what happened? Why aren't you doing solar? We tried to do
We
I
solar.
know, we're not ready to do.
We tried to do solar.
The BTF, the battery task force.
The BTF, yeah.
We store it away for later use.
what if we took the more aggressive position of saying, as part of our plan, we're asking for the 5 acres of Star Map.
We can't.
It's not ours yet.
Right.
No, but
But that's
Can our
okay.
plan say our plan is to seek it?
No, well, that, I will
We're not
certainly
gonna do
say,
that.
I will
Yeah.
certainly say that.
Yeah.
There's no problem with saying we seek
Yeah.
this. But that's not part of the warrant
Warrant.
article. The
Right,
warrant
right.
article is for money. And the
Right.
question is, what are we asking to do? And right now, I'm gonna have to go to the school committee and say, thank you for playing our game, but we have some
Right.
nice parting gifts, here. Yeah, I just think that we're not ready. That's
I think
been,
you've got the order on that.
you know,
Yeah.
and as far as the
A study.
study, no, as far as this, I just feel like we're going to town meeting with no solar. That's kind of my feeling right now.
It's
I
unfortunate.
think you're going, I think you've got 5 minutes at town meeting, don't you?
Yep.
So that's a long time to be on the stage to tell people you're not gonna be doing things.
You're only gonna use Spanish.
He's so kind, isn't he?
So I think, back to Phil's point, I would put it a little bit differently. If we want solar, these are the areas where we need to focus as a community.
Right.
These are the areas. If we want it, these are the
Yep.
areas. We need a big
Yep.
slug out of 2229. We know we don't
Yep.
own it, but we're gonna need a
Yep.
big slug out of it. MCI Concord, we're gonna have to be on the balls of our feet there. CPW, we should know more about CPW as we get closer to town meeting. So that maybe gets clearer.
The filter beds.
The water treatment.
Water treatment plant.
As far as that goes, I don't think we're gonna be close to that by town meeting, Charlie.
No way.
That's a long-term negotiation.
No. What I mean is we'll know at least how big it is.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Right.
You mean the
But how
just the
about
filter
Filter beds, yeah,
The
filter
two.
beds.
Why did you rule out, the landfill?
We're not ruling out the landfill.
No,
Why-
landfill is there
I'm
too.
just saying we have
Landfill's
no
there too.
solar.
No, these are the areas, and we're sorry that we able to.
We're sorry,
Pull any in over
worked-
the goal line this time around, but this is where we're at now. We finished our analysis of the list. We're done analyzing things. This is where the money is.
We
or where the
made our
solar
best
is.
effort. Yeah, we made our best effort to get a project in front of you tonight.
Yeah.
But so far, we've been unable to pull everything together in order to make that happen.
Right.
Is there a realistic hope to have something firm on the landfill by town meeting time?
Based on what
Possibly.
based on what Jason said, if these things can come together as quickly as they can possibly come together, we could probably have a firmer estimate that would be a reasonable ask at town meeting. But I would have to heavily caveat that if I even go to the finance committee hearing and say, we're kinda, coulda, woulda.
They won't recommend it.
They would be like, what are we supposed to be recommending, Mr. Banfield? We have to write a recommendation for our finance committee report that comes out in 2 weeks. What are we recommending? And sometimes they have to say to be recommended
Yeah, I mean,
at town meeting.
that's a lot, so-
That's not a bad thought.
So I think if we focus on what's the ultimate goal with these two projects,
Yeah.
are that we've identified them as some of the most promising. So we would want to get them, if it weren't on this town meeting, it would be the following town meeting.
Yeah.
Or
So
Yeah.
now, so there's my question that, is it better to do that and be safer now and maybe get the projects more shovel ready, more ducks in the
Yeah.
line?
Yeah.
Right.
Or is it better to accelerate the process?
Swing
by
for
any
the
chance-
fences.
Swing for the fences
Yeah.
now, because we already, based on your estimates, financial modeling,
Yeah.
we've already had a conservative scenario where like probably the numbers won't go above the 9 million.
Oh, no, they're not
Okay.
going.
Yeah.
So then we could, if we go for that, like, and maybe the projects aren't in line until the town meeting, the numbers aren't gonna be above that.
No, but I, even as that goes, I would wanna have very, very good solid
Yeah.
numbers. And I would prune back for what we're not doing. So if we're not doing the basin, I would prune that out.
Right.
If I were not doing, the school roof, I'd prune that out. And if we're only doing this, I want a nice firm number. Right now, that's the loosest number I have. oh, I think we can do a meg and a half over there, and I
I'd
think
want
it's
something that you could-
$1.75.
You could literally go to the bank with.
Yeah,
Because that's
because
what
this is
we're
what
doing.
we're asking town meeting. We're asking town meeting to go to the bank
That's
for us. Yeah.
What are you trying to get, what are you trying to get for tonight in the way of an understanding of where we're at, on the funding items? Are you trying to?
What I'm
what
trying
you
to,
do? What?
I need your support for,
Right.
I need the committee's support
Right.
for what I'm presenting. I can create a PowerPoint. I don't have a problem.
We
creating
know that,
PowerPoints.
we know that. You
I
want
can
to,
do that.
we want to know.
But I need to
you
know
need to know.
what I want to know from this committee is what are we asking for money to do? And how much money are we asking to do that?
Okay, so let's go through each item. Are we asking for money for the school roof?
I would say no on that.
And I think it's the message, it's this, I agree,
Right.
because it's not cost effective, so we won't.
We need a.
It's
okay,
not.
So,
it's
sorry,
not
so it's
cost
no,
effective, but
so
B, I'm
it's
also
no on
no
that.
to it.
We have no
Right,
on it.
well, yeah.
Does anybody disagree that it should be no?
I mean, I think if we get it ready for next year, but if we can get it for next year, then I'm fine with that, but we have to,
Well,
I don't want to
they-
miss an opportunity now. People seem like they want in-town solar. And so even if the financials aren't exactly there, it might get past that town meeting. So I don't want to miss an opportunity if next year it doesn't.
I don't want to go and disappoint people,
Yeah,
Right.
but I feel like the school roof ain't happening.
I
That's
agree.
Yeah.
that's
Yeah,
my
I
opinion.
think so.
And it may not happen at all because of the financials.
Well,
Yeah,
I
it
think we
wouldn't
ought
be
to
the
try to be
first
clean
time.
about this. We ought to try to be clean about this. I mean, so on point number one, the answer is that's out. That's what I'm hearing. Unless somebody,
Well,
for this year.
For this, yeah,
I don't
I
think
think
we're gonna, I don't think we're gonna put the caveat in there because that just, anything can happen next year,
For this
right?
year's town meeting.
What I would say
that.
is it's out. It is unlikely to resurface without a subsidy that the town is willing to undertake to build it.
Okay, so that's point one. Point two is, what about the landfill? Is that out? I think the answer to that is we don't have enough. We don't know even whether it's feasible. We don't know anything about the degrees of slope and whether it's doable. They haven't even looked at it.
I know. I
So,
know.
so that being the case, and given the fact that you have to go make these comments, I think we're out of time. That's over. So
I think it's time down.
Yeah, there's something that bothers me there. At town meeting, it wouldn't be the first time that the town has appropriated monies which ended up not being spent.
And it's not
That's-
even the town appropriating money.
That's
It's the CMLP
true.
budget.
It's not, it's,
well, it is the.
The
town.
bond.
it is the town, it's a bonding issue.
Right.
And how it gets paid back is through the light plant, but it's
Right.
still the town who does
Right.
appropriate the bonding, the bonding. It's not that things don't get spent and rescissions have to occur. Typically, projects, I'm not familiar with projects that literally don't get done at all. And then the whole bond is rescinded. What typically happens is it costs less to do, or
And then they
you
rescind.
change the nature of what you're
Right.
doing, and then there's leftover money that doesn't get expended. And then you have to.
yeah, in this case where we're trying to ask for money for something where there's been no homework.
Right, exactly, there's not been enough homework.
So has anybody got an objection to dropping, to us moving ahead and dropping the landfill from the town here?
I
I have a
have an
question.
objection. I think we have to be able to say something. Question is how much?
How would you calculate
That's
the number?
a different point than the question I asked though, isn't it?
No, I'm saying, the question is, do we want to have an article with anything in it?
I think we do, but let's go through the points. I don't think the article should have the landfill based on where we are right now.
What would you need in the future for?
I would need to be able to go to the finance hearing and have a solid understanding. Usually the way this works and is that you can have a somewhat rough plan
Right.
when you put your warrant article in,
Right.
but then you have 4 months to get to town meeting. Well, we've spent 2+
Right.
getting to where we are, and we still aren't really very
Don't have
close.
enough.
We've spent 3, because I put it in December, and so we're into the 3rd month.
Do you remember all the times that we asked Dave? Dave, where are we with the feasibility? Where are we with, I've decided to
Yeah.
go talk to Kearsarge.
In
And they still talk the
October,
thing right into the grave.
in October, we made a call here in this room to say, we want to knife off the landfill and only focus on our piece of it and do it as an independent thing. Okay? And it was always merged with Kearsarge and was never sliced off, and no feasibility was run on our one thing that we wanted to do independently, and here we are.
So for a better understanding.
So we're saying that,
Feasibility study.
We need it.
You need a solid
Jason
engineering.
talked
And
about.
Jason's
Yeah.
trying to get it, but I feel like I'm not in a position
Yeah.
to go forward. So,
so
I'm
that,
good-
we've
I'm
got,
good with-
we haven't got through them all yet.
but, okay, but Charlie, on this one, it's a very different message from the school. I would say the school is unlikely to resurface unless there is a subsidy to make it a viable alternative. On this one, I would be willing to say, we will continue to pursue this. We believe that this is financially viable.
Well, you're
Well,
kind of
that's-
raising, you're kind of raising a new thing about financial viability at the kind of the last. You know, that the financial viability wasn't an issue before, and we knew what they cost before. We knew they cost $2.50. How does this suddenly become an issue? The issue to us is time. The issue
Well,
to
right
us,
now, well, okay, so when
we
people
can
say.
feel bad about the money, but that wasn't a material aspect of the reason why we're
Okay.
having trouble.
All right, well, your statement that it is not coming back is based on what then?
No, I didn't say it's not coming back. I said that I didn't think we should have caveats in there that had conditions about how it was going to come back. You know, anything can come back, but I
Okay.
don't think that we should.
I
I don't
see.
think we should start throwing out new conditions that
Okay,
you got to jump through this hoop now.
all right.
That's not shouldn't be part of our game.
All
Now,
right, so
maybe I'm missing something here, but I just
So this
don't
is
think that's
binary.
Yeah.
In your view, it's binary. We're either ready or we're not ready.
Right.
either
we're not ready.
either we have it or we don't. Either we have what we need to go to the meeting or we don't.
And we don't right
We
now.
don't.
Don't.
So, yeah. And I won't, I will not by the 14th, I don't think. And I will not, it is highly unlikely that I'll have anything by the
This is
19th.
2 weeks, no.
Isn't it true that we've had major projects which were subject to a ceiling after you go out to bid? And therefore, could we go ahead and propose the landfill subject to a successful bid of no greater than X?
We don't know, we don't know.
Usually
We don't
at
know if
town
we can-
meeting,
we
we
can-
have
We
to
don't know,
have,
we don't know whether we can do a bid at all.
Yeah,
we have to have
We,
confidence. in the
it may be the
design of
case
the
that they come back and go, the slope's too great, we can't put mounts on here,
right, and
you know?
we can't dig
We
deep
don't-
enough
we
through the
can't-
cover to support it, and
And we are days away from that
we're months.
basic piece of it.
We're a minimum of 2 weeks away from that, from knowing that. That's literally go, no go level.
Okay.
We're at least 2 weeks, and I won't have that when I'm in front of the finance hearing. I won't have that.
So what is
So I
Dean
don't even
supposed to say when they say, well, what's this gonna cost? I
And
don't
then
really
what am I
know.
supposed to say? And then I just go. Blah, 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 blah,
No
blah.
more than
Yeah,
5
right,
minutes.
so we're not doing that.
No, I'm just saying, we're
By-
proposing what we
and
had.
by
Is
doing that,
there,
bring down the whole committee,
is there,
Yeah,
no,
no,
exactly.
Bring the whole credibility
bring the
of our
whole
work,
task force to
so
a
we're not
stop.
putting it
Yeah.
forward.
Is there,
Now, the
And
next
utility-
question is the battery. Let's just
Yeah.
keep moving along here. The battery is the next question.
I'm
I'm not so impressed that we know what we're trying to do with this battery. I hate to be a
Bucket of cold water?
doubting Thomas, but
without solar, I don't understand fully. the purpose of the
no,
battery.
there is a valid purpose here. But the question I was getting at with Jason was with respect to the problem. If the problem is going to be addressed by the battery, then we should go buy the battery. If the problem that he feels is going to be addressed by the metering domain, well, then we don't need to buy the battery, at least not now. And if we're not going to, be wired into a process. I mean, I'm just throwing this out as a line of work. It's not necessarily the one we have to follow, but we don't have any integration between the analytics that we want to do relative to the use of the what do you call what would we call it, the predictive capability.
Yeah.
The microgrid controller we're talking
The
about.
microgrid controller, the microcontroller problem was supposed to have been kind of married to the battery. So we take the battery and we take the microgrid controller stuff and we bundle that up, and that's a project called mitigating risk. And I mean, my assessment is we are a long way off from having a handle on that one with the light plant. Although I do think Jason was pretty sharp about the stuff tonight. Not to say that I am any sharper, but at least I'm a little bit more focused on it.
So, I mean, with all this,
Well, the one thing that the battery could be, even if it's not mitigating the risk, one thing that it could be is a financial boon to the light plant if the ENA service is what they guarantee it to be. It could be a financial boon to the light plant.
To
And
the
it could-
anything. So we're willing to throw a dart against the wall on that. I'm okay with that. You know, maybe we
They have a
that's
contracted.
okay, but it's kind of a dart against the wall. And you're gonna be up there trying to just talk about this without really anything other than, yeah, well, that's what we do.
I just,
Can you, we've renamed the committee, the battery committee.
Battery task force.
But is it
Did you see what I'm
possible?
saying, Dean? See, most of what we're saying about the battery now is kind of speculative. It could fit into this, it could be a benefit to that, you know, da, 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 da. I mean, here's a $2.5 million or $3 million
they
thing.
didn't put the CMS battery in yet either.
Well, yeah, the problem, that's the related problem is we got the CMS battery. Now,
Right.
why are we putting in a CMS battery? Why are we doing that?
All
All right,
But, yeah,
I could be
So,
convinced to
Steve-
take the battery off, so that leaves
I mean,
us,
I feel like
that
we
leaves
should
with
pull the whole
100K
thing.
for a
We should-
study.
Oh, I'm
for a study.
putting it out there.
And a
I'm putting it
slot
out
town
there.
meeting to talk.
right.
A
I'm
5
putting
minute.
it out there because it's a question that we should ask, right? We should finish asking the questions.
What questions do you have left to ask?
Well,
The battery. Do we want to use the
Okay.
battery? Do we want the battery in the proposal?
So Stephen.
Is there any logical sense to say that the battery and the study are linked and are important steps before we add more solar?
Yes, that is exactly the statement that should be made, that we shouldn't add any solar into the system until the battery and the
Controls.
and the controllers are set up to mitigate the risk associated with more solar. I mean, you know, fix your problems before you know,
Make it worse.
before you put the addition on the house, you know, put the furnace in the first house you had. So, you know, so yeah, I think Steve, your point is precisely actually what I wrote down in this document here.
I'm trying to think of, we've done a lot of studies, we've learned a lot of stuff. And one of the things we've learned is that the battery and the controls are vitally important to the long-term success. And so that's our first request.
That's our request. Now, we could say that
Does that make sense?
I think we're close enough on this one almost to take the leap of faith and say that we might know some stuff here that maybe everybody doesn't know.
I'm just throwing it out there to try to.
Yeah, we're willing to take the
Yeah,
risk
well.
because it's a feasibility study and we want the battery to be part of it and so forth and so on. So I think we can stretch that one. Leave the battery in there and make that the centerpiece of what we're doing, because this is all we should be doing anyway, realistically speaking.
And if they come back and say, well, you haven't justified the battery, we'll give you the study money.
Well,
That's a small amount, but
battery,
it's not going to warrant
It's
for it.
not with, how does that
Yeah.
know?
the battery justification can be done by basically saying that this is going on the weak side of the environment.
Plus,
And it's critical to this purpose and that purpose, and it saves us, you know, $500,000 a year or whatever, and so forth and so on. So I think we can
You have to
justify.
be ready for that location question.
Yeah.
We're gonna ask where it goes,
Where's
Yeah.
it gonna go?
Right.
because we have addresses for the
We
solar
have-
sites which don't exist.
So then on the flip side, you save your powder and say, pull this year. But make
I-
a statement saying, look, we've made some great research and you know, that we will be coming back in a future meeting with you know, a solid long-term strategy.
Will we
Did you-
exist as a?
did you say to
task
pull
force
the
tomorrow?
article? Did you say to pull the
Next year.
article and just make the presentation? Is that what you said, Steve?
you can't pull the article, not move anything, and then make a presentation.
no,
That's
no,
not-
What I was gonna say is when you go to finance committee, I'm focusing right there,
Yeah,
right? So
okay,
you go to finance committee and say, let me give you the complete clarity
I
on
don't care.
our
They just let you
situation.
vote.
right.
And say, this is where we're at. And after having told you all this, I think it's prudent for us to, pull the article.
Well, I would be reasonably satisfied if we. I mean, I think it's a reasonable approach, pull the battery and go with the study.
But I don't think it's big enough to warrant having an article for
I
it.
don't even.
And the town,
It's 100K, Charlie, it's
And that's,
nothing.
CMLP just pulls it out of,
and there's
Reserves.
When
nobody's
they're ready, right.
excitement about solar that will help.
Yeah, well, then you have to pull the article. Yeah, you have to pull it. But I
there's
just,
no excitement about the study either.
Right, there'll be none about that, right?
I
So
think.
I came into this meeting with the idea that we would move the battery and the study. And that we would be able to benefit from the battery at a minimum through our reductions to the ISO.
Mhm.
That was a service that ENE has contracted for and,
There's no,
you know,
no entity.
they've been making guarantees to the light plant that they would hit 80% of this and 95% of that over a
Yeah.
5-year period. There are various assertions that they've made about being able to manage these batteries. So, at a minimum, we outsource that thing for that purpose. Now, if it doesn't solve the solar saturation, because we don't have a way of figuring that out, we're no worse off and we're financially better off for having done the battery.
Yeah.
So I was willing to go, I came into the meeting thinking, okay, we got nothing on these things, but let's go with a battery and a study.
Right,
And it's like, it turns into about a $3 million ask, 2.8 for the
into the
battery,
location,
another
I'd
100,000.
say put it at the, just say you're gonna put it, the primary
substation.
location is gonna be at the substation or the landfill.
It could be at the substation, could be at the landfill,
The
or
water.
it could be,
Too.
or it could be,
Yeah.
or it could be over at the bus depot area near.
And
near
there's a
Well,
minimum.
and I think in this case, we were, this is the alternative strategy is we're going to assume that we can pull this off. That we're not going to get ignored. As the light plant goes forward, but that could be the case.
Now, before we drop off, I mean, we're past 8:30. I do want Jason's feedback. If I were to go to the finance committee and ask for a battery and 100K for a study,
Study of what?
Would CMLP support you?
what do you think?
The landfill.
Well, I gotta get I gotta go to the light board, I gotta go to everybody,
Should be
you know.
include the
but-
landfill.
Jason, you still there? Or is that just the Concord
Oh,
icon?
no, he's coming, he's there.
I'm still here.
Asleep, he's asleep though.
Uh, If I didn't have
I'm
three
sure-
kids, I would be asleep. So yeah, I was listening. So your question is if you move just the battery and the feasibility,
Yeah,
then and what was if you do that, then what's the question?
so the question really is, we, based on where I am, by the time I
Right.
arrive at the hearing, I'm not gonna have information.
Right, I heard all the
on-
lead up.
You
Yeah,
heard
I
all
heard-
that,
heard
okay?
all that.
So my proposal was to move for the battery and the study. And my question to you is, if we add this battery, are you confident that ENE will provide the service that they've they've promised to Laura and to the light plant, that they're already kind of on the hook for
Yeah.
the other?
Laura and Joe seem to think that there's a high degree of confidence there that E&E can manage a battery. I personally haven't seen their battery presentation, so I was eager for them to come present to you to learn more about it. But
Yeah.
I'm fairly confident that they're capable of doing that. I think that with the AMS data we have, and that might help us. But if we're trying to use the battery for peak shaving, we really need the SCADA system deployed before we can do that. So I do feel like there's an order here that for the financial sense that you're talking about, we need that data first. And so I'm just unclear if that's gonna be as financially beneficial in the short term.
So, okay, so
Battery.
let's back up a minute. So there's two use cases. One is mitigating solar saturation. And you need all kinds of data that's internal to the system that we don't have.
To do it
right?
automatically.
To do, not even to do it automatically,
To know the answer.
to know when, to
Just
know
to meter
when.
it, just to
and-
meter the system.
To meter the system and decide, oh gosh, we're in trouble, we need to do something. So we're not in a position to really exercise any kind of detailed control of energy storage and then dispatch to save ourselves from solar saturation. It's not gonna help us out of the box right there. But with the E&E service, we have the potential for it to reduce our peaks that are, our
ISO.
usage during ISO peaks, and that saves us money. And so I think that, at least financially, helps us to, the battery is a justifiable product in that case. In terms of financial, the risk mitigation from solar saturation, we haven't put any kind of number on that. It's just like, it's almost existential. You gotta have it, but we haven't figured out a financial, value to that. But we do have a financial value that Laura put together for what a battery is worth in just reducing our peaks and, or not really our peaks, but reducing our consumption during ISO peaks.
Right.
I think there's one flaw.
I wanna let Jason say that.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, I just wanted to say one other thing, and that is that if the peak is being pushed sometimes to the shoulder months, we have to be careful that because we don't have visibility to the demand of the network internally, that if they decide to discharge this battery during an ISO peak, and we're actually have a lot of solar capacity coming on the grid and not a lot of demand, that in and of itself could cause that situation that we're trying to prevent and become like solar saturation.
So
I guess, yeah, I've listened to your comments, Jason, and I at least I've tried to understand what you're saying. And I think one thing that comes through to me has to do with timing, has to do with workload, and has to do with priorities. And I think that we understand the financials. We could put together a financial case. The question is the timing correct to go to town meeting and ask for this year? Or would it be smarter to wait another year? Those are basically the choices. They're binary. Either we ask for it now, or we ask for it later. And if we don't ask for it now, you could still do the feasibility study now because you have the money, sitting around, in the various capital accounts. So the question is, would you think that it's prudent for us, given where we're at, to make this capital request at town meeting for a battery this year?
Can I add to that question
Sure.
just very briefly? When would the SCADA system be online, and how long does a battery take to procure and install? I think those are two important factors.
Yeah, I mean, if we knew exactly how long the lead times were, we'd be playing the lottery. So I think that we know the battery lead times are long, but not as long as they were maybe a year ago. Things are improving in that front, but I don't have a date. We're going to know very soon because we're going to have the middle school battery spec'd and we're going to be going out to bid. So, as we design the bid documents, we're going to be looking at lead times and different options. So, the lead times will inform the specifications so that we don't end up with a 2-year, 3-year lead time for the battery. So I don't know the answer to the battery. I'm guessing several months to a year for the battery, but I don't know for sure. And then the other question was on what?
SCADA.
The SCADA. So the SCADA, as far as I understand, the SCADA is supposed to go out to bid in the late spring. And then they're looking at maybe a year to total completion, but that doesn't mean a year until we start getting data. We're going to start getting data within a few months, but they do spend a lot of time redesigning and also redocumenting the entire system, which hasn't been done in a very long time. Dave Wood did it last maybe 15 to 20 years ago. So as changes are made, those documents aren't often updated. It's just in the line crew leader and the engineers' heads. and in some CAD systems that they have internally, but it's not sort of integrated in one place. So part of that will be to create that framework. So there's a lot of front-loaded work, but then because we have a lot of SEL equipment out there already, my understanding is that part of it will be putting the brains in the substation and then tying in all of those and reprogramming them so that they're sending that data. And then some equipment will have to be replaced. So the last I heard, I think they were estimating around a $2 million project at the highest. And that again, about that year time frame, but we'll know again a lot more later spring. The timeline will be once we have the formal bid documents and we figure out the procurement.
Jason, after you put the SCADA in, when do you feel you'll have a confidence in a data set to be able to take decisions and actions from it? Do you need a year, 2 years worth of data before you say, you know what, now I really know what we're doing? And then I can, you know.
A year is what the light board set aside for the time of use for the advanced metering system. So they wanted to make sure that they saw a year's worth of data. I think that you're right that it won't be fully beneficial on day one because you're going to be making a lot of assumptions, but you're also working with real data. So I do feel like at the point we have SCADA complete, I think we're ready for the microgrid controller. I think we can start using that device to take input because we're already going to have the battery at CMS and we're going to need to manage that. And if we're using E&E initially, we have the microgrid controller, we might be able to take over ownership or at least most of the ownership. And so, you know, I think that pretty quickly after SCADA is done, we can start moving forward with these things. I don't think we have to wait a year, but I do think that if you're going to automate things and just go to sleep, assuming that, you know, everything is working perfectly, that might take several months after SCADA is deployed. But I do think day one, you're going to be able to see, it's kind of like monitoring any data center or anything, you know, you're immediately going to get huge results from it, but you're not going to know everything blindfolded until you've gone through cycles of seasons and understand how things perform.
In the interest of time, you said the question I asked was your take on whether we should go for it this year. And I guess what I'm hearing is we probably should, unless I'm not hearing you correctly, that you guys are, you know, relatively balanced and that we could get this started now and get the stuff order going and start chugging away. Or do you think we ought to wait a year?
I don't know that it's my place to say do it
Well,
now
but
or
I
do it
think
later.
it is. I think it's somewhat is your place to determine whether you have the staff capability to take advantage of this or whether it's just going to go in the pile. And I think there would be some expectation that there would be some action relative to you know the pursuit of this.
Right. So the middle school project is ongoing and expected to take much longer than the February planned opening of the middle school itself. And so, you know, significant staff resources are involved in that right now. SCADA is going to add on top of that. Advanced metering probably won't be deployed until the end of the year. And so just those three things alone are taking up more staff time than we have now. That's why I mentioned we're bringing in a project manager to help with the middle school, and we also have Michael Hale coming one day a week to help with projects. But you know, there's also the rebuilding of the department, right? I'm the interim director,
Yeah,
so
yeah.
you're looking at transitions and changes, and so it's a lot, you know, but it needs to get done. So, but what is the right timing? I don't know. And this is authorization to borrow. So whether we borrow it tomorrow or, I mean, the day after town meeting or 6 months after town meeting, it's there, right? So to me, I agree with everything you're looking to do. The question is again, timing, and does it make sense to have a combined article where everything is on the table and everything is connected? Or do you want to get something done now to say that, you know, we've got the battery and the feasibility figured out, but here's why we're, you know, punting on these other things, but we're going to come back next year with everything ready. So again, I agree with I think it's a good question to ask about capabilities because, you know, to be honest, I think with all the things I mentioned, there's going to be a bit of a challenge initially.
Well, I guess what I've heard is and what I make of all of this, just for what it's worth for the group. I mean, I think we should go with it. I think we should pursue battery and the feasibility. I think that you know, I have, you know,
That's
Pretty
kind of
good
how I
story,
came
pretty
into
good
the
story
meeting
here.
feeling.
What'd you say? What'd you say, Dean?
I said, that's how I came into the meeting feeling, like these other two, things are just
Pretty
a
obvious.
little bit
Yeah.
off the rails.
Right.
But we have a good financial model, we understand the finances associated with a battery. We may have technical issues with deploying it, but we don't have to deploy it tomorrow. We could cut our teeth on the battery at CMS.
Yeah.
And if that's going along okay, put it in order right away and go for it, and you have the funding available.
I think we could do more.
Well, I,
But we're not.
you're gonna
Wait,
have to.
wait, I think we're trying to wrap up what we can do.
This committee.
What we
Let
can
me
do.
be
I
very
think,
specific.
What, okay,
What I think we could do is to go with a package of the battery, sure, and study to assure the economic feasibility of, as a minimum, the landfill. If there's one more, that'd be great, but there probably isn't. So that we are in fact asking the town something, and not to pay for the study, to come up with some numbers for economic feasibility. At which point, we've actually done something on our avowed mission.
that's not a bad thought.
Yeah.
Right now, Jason has already requested of the light board money to do the feasibility study
Yeah.
for the landfill.
Yeah.
So it would sort of be redundant for us to do that.
Yeah.
It would, we could sort of sneakily do that and just to show the town that this is in our wheelhouse. It's
Or
part of our-
jointly,
Here, you know.
jointly
but-
as with the light board, the
Yeah,
study.
Jason's already asked for money and the light board has
Yeah,
already
great.
appropriated money so that he can do it. So, it
I
seems.
think we're good. If you're good, Dean, then we're good. And I think Jason has been very forthright with the whole thing. I think we're ready to go here.
So,
So to recap, it's the battery,
battery studies.
And
Study of-
micro.
Study of what?
Microgrid and this and that,
Yeah.
and, you know,
Is the study associated with the use of the battery, or is the study?
We'll clean up the microgrid controller study and
Nice.
feasibility study stuff. We'll clean that up. We know what that is.
But does that have anything to do with solar?
Yes.
Yes.
It has
To do with the
it,
system.
it has to do with the acceptance of additional solar onto
Yeah.
the system. So we're preparing the infrastructure. This study will help us prepare the light plant distribution system to accept the solar that we hope to bring you in the future.
It's a necessary
So
first
it's a
step.
necessary first step.
and say we're future proofing, we're working on a long report.
Future proofing.
There it is.
Future proofing, that's right, yes.
Enabling. It's an
Y2,
enabling.
we're doing Y2K.
Please, no loss.
No, no,
No
no, but
loss.
it's a critical enabling activity required for
Yeah.
us to proceed with our task
All
force
right.
goal of.
Well, that's
We're good.
certainly,
Good.
it's a positive spin on
Yeah.
something which
I-
otherwise,
Yeah, I know, don't get me wrong, it's a disappointment to me. We went
Right.
in December with 3 solar potential thinking,
Yeah.
well, 1 or 2 of them may fall out. We'll end up with 1 and we're now coming out with 0,
Yeah.
which is really
So
unfortunate.
next year.
But there's a special town meeting potentially in the fall and there's always next year.
Yeah.
So,
There is.
And the light plant is fully teed up on the landfill, so
yeah.
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 rolling in that direction.
if we go this way, could we at least make a decision internally that we have a goal of having a yes or no answer by a date certain on the landfill, rather than saying, well, someday?
We expect to have better information. I can say the light plant is contracting for the feasibility work. We would have come to you for feasibility money, but they've already found money internally to the light plant budget to do this feasibility work, but it hasn't yet been contracted. We don't have it in place or the result. So we're not here to ask to do that because it's gonna get done. And we expect that to be done even potentially by the time we arrive at town meeting, that feasibility study may be done. But I'm not gonna be in a position to like completely rejigger everything by then. I have to. I have
The
to
light
stop.
plant doesn't need any more encouragement on this point.
No, they
No,
don't.
no, no.
They don't. It's all good. Everybody's doing what they can as fast as they can.
Okay,
What I have to do is a little messaging with the school
Schools,
committee.
Are you prepared for the finance committee to say no to this study?
If they come back and say,
They say they'll like.
Well, they don't get to say yes or no, they get
Yeah,
to say
no.
recommend, don't
Are you
recommend.
prepared if they say don't recommend?
I'm,
You know what, they're gonna be.
No,
worried
no,
about
this is
that.
not
The
really,
battery is a
Yeah.
huge
it's a
positive,
huge
so
positive.
they're gonna.
Just the study, the study.
no, the
No,
battery.
no, no,
stuff
it's,
is
the
a huge-
warrant they're voting on,
Right.
it's the package.
Got it, got
It's the
Yeah.
feasibility.
Yeah,
of
the
that.
feasibility study is like, it's like a,
So,
it's like the, the fly on the back of an
Yeah,
elephant.
it just shows
so the
good-
only question Dana and I had is someone's gonna ask about that battery. And remember, we put either the landfill or the CCHS campus. Do we have any concerns there?
Well, we can put it at the landfill.
Yeah.
And I suppose if we,
yeah.
it's still a place where we can put the battery.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And if we're constrained and they, we want to come back and say, oh, by the way, we're putting it over at the substation.
Right.
Yeah.
Um,
Do you want to, can we amend the text?
well, that's a question that I can ask the
That's where I
moderator.
was-
I can ask the moderator, does this get outside of the scope?
Right.
the
but
battery,
by change-
battery is not location specific in that article.
So, yes,
Might be asked.
it's everything, it's sort of solar.
I
blah,
think
blah,
it,
blah.
I think the way the article reads, you have these two locations and we're doing this in battery,
Yeah.
So it's really constraining, a little bit constraining, but I can ask the moderator whether
Yeah,
that's
that's
a,
fine, just,
you know,
yeah, great. Good.
All right,
I'm sure it goes without saying, but yeah, I know you've already talked about this before, but I think emphasizing the point, especially with the finance committee, and then beyond that, if there's focus on batteries, that there's these unprecedented incentives, you know,
Okay,
to help offset the costs, and there's no guarantee that
these will be.
these will be around in the future, but they're here
Yeah,
now.
that's fair.
And the timing of that is, I think, is fairly
Yeah,
important.
no, that's actually.
Yeah, that's a
really good
important
I mean, it's really not, yeah, I mean, there hasn't been anything like this before. There's an opportunity for the town that,
The legislation actually says this should be going on until 2030, I believe.
Does
Or
it?
Yeah.
It's like 10
you
years.
never know how the
actually, it's 10
political
years.
winds will change.
I know,
with
that's
that.
also.
Availability of funds that. You know, but I mean, like I said, I know you've talked about that before, but I really think that's an important point, especially with the finance committee to hammer
Yeah.
home that,
Yeah.
Oh, yeah,
this is unprecedented.
they don't want to
Put
lose
on
money
your
on
best
the
Yeah,
face
table.
and
person
it's-
hat.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's essentially, free money, guaranteed money.
Yeah,
All right, I think we've managed to beat this horse senseless and I have my marching orders.
New business?
No. I've got.
all we know is that it's your fault, Dean. So.
Yeah, that's fine. Pile it on, that's fine.
Right.
I've got my work cut out for me. I've got, not only got to go to the finance committee, but I have to communicate this to the school administration and the school committee that, thank you for playing. We're gonna pull back.
we're gonna,
Not this year, not happening this year.
and then
Not
Jason
ready.
doesn't have to have anybody go up on that roof.
Well,
Pursue that.
we can,
The question,
you can calm down on that one if you want, Jason.
Right.
We can calm down and we can all just cool our heels,
Yeah.
especially this intermunicipal agreement. You
Yeah,
can,
right.
we
Yeah.
can
just play
just,
that card first and see what they say.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
But I still think we should keep the momentum going, but
we'll do what
Slow
we
it down.
If
can,
the
but,
economics never work out, what's the point of
No.
right,
going further?
right. The economics don't work
Yeah,
out.
But if you slam the brakes now, it looks bad in front of the school committee, I would just let it slide for a little bit and see, and before we can pull that trigger, but.
yeah.
That's
I
it.
don't have any other alternative.
Yeah, you don't.
I
You
gotta
gotta
come up,
do it.
and let them know where we are. This is it's on tape. They're gonna come
Yeah.
watch, So it's not I don't have a problem with it. It's just not a conversation I'm looking forward to. That's all.
Yeah.
Well, Jason, when would they get up on the roof? What's your thought on that?
Oh, the timing of the document, I don't know, they're gonna wanna have a committee meeting to vote on whether to sign the agreement, so whenever their schedule is, we can get that on the agenda and then get the agreement executed. So,
Then we've
There's a lot
got,
of
then we've got to wait through the school committee. You were talking about the school
Yeah.
committee?
Yes.
Yeah, so it's sometime this summer.
We're talking about, what, I don't know, we're talking about a couple of months anyway, aren't we?
Well, I don't know about that. I mean, they would get it, they would send it off to their lawyer would turn around, like Lori would get it, she'd turn it
Wait
to
for
her
another
lawyer,
meeting.
lawyer would come back, then they'd hand it to the school committee and, it's time.
Yeah.
It's time.
Well, we certainly don't want to put them in the position of spending a lot of effort and money on something we already know we're not gonna go ahead with.
It's unlikely.
Okay,
All right, I need a motion here.
Any public comment? I mean,
Oh, is there any
Any
public comment? The public seems to have weighed out. There's
No, I
no
don't
public
think so.
left.
it could be
We
public.
had one.
Know about it.
Left.
Carlin didn't stay for the good stuff.
I know. I make that motion that we adjourn?
I second it.
Okay, we're gonna go around the room since I'll start on the screen. Charlie,
Yes.
Bill,
Yes.
Steve.
Yes.
Wendy,
Yes.
Gavin.
Yes.
And myself, we're out.